Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome again on a Sunday evening, and this session is going to be very interesting. And before we start with the session, we'll be discussing a number of companies from business point of view, or the shares would be the views will be individual, and I would request each and every one of the audiences to take the conversation as a starting point, should not be construed as any kind of buy, sell, or hold recommendation. And we reserve all the right to change our views as the developments in those company change. So please keep that in the back of your mind and take the conversation only from an educational point of view. We are not SEBI registered, and we sincerely request you guys to do your due diligence before acting on any of the names. So we had those who are joining for the first time. So Ameya has great interest in the IT sector, and the nature of the job is also from the same sector. And apart from that, he also invests in other sectors, but primarily he loved to share thought about the IT sector. So during the course of this conversation, we'll be knowing from him different pockets within the IT sector, how the results were, and what were the surprises or deviations, if there are any. And after that, if there would be any questions from the audience, we'll be happy to take those questions. But only request is do not plain and simple ask कि ये लेना है ये बेचना है, because that kind of thing won't be answered and will not be entertained by any means. So Ameya bhai, like we always get a request so as to keep it Hindi English mix, because we have our audience across India and even abroad also. So we will try to do justice on that front. And to begin with, I would request you to share your thoughts about the Q4 result across the pockets, the segregation which you make, and then we start on with the questions.
Sure, sure. Okay, so to be very honest, I don't track every single company from the sector, but I take kind of a representative from various pockets like the frontline IT services, the small caps, mid caps, SMEs, product companies, SaaS companies, and so on, right? So, um, to be very honest with you, there were not many surprises from the frontline IT results perspective. One which is very interesting that thing that happened is with TCS, and we are discussing primarily about the frontline IT companies right now. And I will just go on saying that even though I discuss these companies, it's purely my professional and academics reason. I may not have position in some of the names that we discuss here. But I follow industry very closely. I work within the industry, so that's why this space really interests me. So if you have seen, let's say the top 4 or 5 companies, TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, LTI, TechM, and all these kind of things, right? So I'm not counting Wipro to be very honest as of now, because there is a um, management change, and let's see how that change translates, how soon it translates into a growth. But there was a similar transition with TCS as well, and they brought in a new management to lead the company from head on. And आप सबने रिजल्ट में तो देखा ही होगा, the revenue mix has changed very significantly, and this is the precise reason why TCS was able to post comparatively better growth compared to the other frontline companies like Infosys and so on, right? So their geography focus shifted a little bit from the US and Europe into the Middle East and domestic India, which basically helped them, drive the growth, whatever growth that be. And the base is very large, but there's still a growth, regardless what the number we put to that growth, but there's still a growth. But that kind of a sudden transition, geographical transition, the other companies couldn't do, or probably they didn't do. That's why you see the result from the other companies is not anywhere close to what TCS did. So that is one very interesting thing. We saw an uptick, we saw expansion in numbers from TCS. And that was a complete outcome of the way they changed their focus. They understood the pain areas, geographically pain areas, and they kept waiting for quite a long time to see if there is any change, any offshoot of growth coming from those geographical areas. And when they understood that, we cannot just keep on waiting, they've moved their focus a little bit to different geographies, and that has translated into really good numbers. I hope they keep it. Um, Infosys, like we talked about, they have a very good presence within the Europe, very strong digital transformation projects that they have. Industrial, manufacturing, energy utility space, they're very dominant compared to the rest of the peers. So that's a good thing, to be very honest. But moving on, Tech Mahindra recently, kind of, after having Mohit Joshi over, there was also a management change, and they went through a kind of a complete corporate restructuring. They kind of rewrote their vision, what they want to achieve, how they will achieve that, the kind of SWOT analysis of the company. They presented a very, kind of a flashy marketing deck, where they highlighted what are our priorities and what are the ways through which we will reach those priorities, what are long-term goals, what are short-term goals, KPIs for measurement of the performance. So basically, uh, there is optimism about the kind of change that the new management will be able to bring about. But again, all these companies have fairly large bases, and if someone is already invested in long time in these companies, these are very asset light, and keep on giving you decent dividends. But the market and the composition of the market trend is changing very rapidly these days. So we have been talking about this in our previous spaces, Prince, if you can recall. So the tech largely was steady until, let's say, I'm not putting exact year, it's a rough number I'm talking about. So tech was more or less steady until, let's say, 2015, 2016. When I say steady, that means tech was steady, the innovation was steady, and people were, able to catch up to the pace of change. Suddenly after COVID, you saw uh, rise of cloud solution. There was a sudden need to adopt to cloud, and you saw a lot of companies actually went sky high, and then suddenly they dropped off as well. But overall industry per se, cloud kind of laid a foundation for something that we everybody's talking about these days is generative AI, right? So cloud is kind of a foundation, and it laid down the foundation for AI adoption across the pockets. And so so now the technology at that phase where the technology is changing so fast. Uh, we talked about this. I don't want to get into technicalities of it, but just a few minutes. So we were talking about LLMs the other day, LLM as a service the other day, and then from the binary systems, now we are talking about ternary systems. And so basically, the pace at which these things are coming up to the front, that pace has increased very significantly. And to be very honest with you, public in general is finding it a little difficult to catch up to that pace. So that is the change in the technology space overall that has happened in last 10 odd years, right? So you have to clearly understand when this composition of the trend changes, what are the companies that are coming up to the front. So earlier it was very dominantly driven by IT services, and it was basically a price arbitrage. We had vanilla IT companies, and then services, and services contributed significant revenue. uh, Going down the line, then it continued for a certain period of time, and from the the experience that these IT companies gathered, they kind of productized the services, right? So some of the companies also launched some products, and 2020 we saw cloud and sudden need to transition to the cloud. And now fast forward to 2024, you see that has enabled transition to AI. So without cloud, you cannot imagine consuming anything related to global AI products, right? So, as an investor, your investments must also change according to this trend. Last year in June, we talked about how GPUs are getting sold out everywhere, and so on. We talked about data centers, and that's primarily about the broader trend. within the sector, and that trend is the composition of that trend is very significantly changing. So after 2020, the sudden demand for cloud that came, these IT companies were kind of prepared to serve that demand because cloud was not a new concept, right? It's just that after COVID, everything started shutting down and people adopted cloud. But the cloud was not new. So the capabilities were built around that ahead of the time. So the frontline IT companies could serve the cloud demand. Now the cloud demand 2023-24 has been normalized to a great extent. It is growing, but it's not like the vertical growth earlier. So it's still growing at a very rapid pace. But you see the primarily the large enterprises and the large accounts, they are companies have kind of already gotten into reaching the productive stage with their cloud adoption and so on, right? Then there was another company, and we're talking primarily about the frontline companies. LTI Mindtree, the merger went through. There was so much talk about the kind of synergies that exist between the merger, how the it's a synergistic merger. It's not competitive, as in there is no competition for the same account for the same customer in the same geography. And the management kind of mentioned that, even if they don't see any organic demand coming in externally, the cross sell opportunity is so huge that they will keep on growing. But unfortunately, the numbers don't show that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that the frontline companies are kind of fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts, right? And that is primarily the reason you don't see these companies getting talked about very frequently these days. But at the same time, the product space and the SaaS space that has proliferated quite significantly well. Companies which are primarily driving their services through product, they have seen very good results. For example, Newgen has reported very nice numbers. And there are certain companies which are coming up within the emerging trends within the overall IT trend, right, that we were talking about. So yeah, and then there are some of the mid-cap companies and ER&D companies that we previously talked about. If you are tracking ER&D as a sector, and you need to track the performance of the EPAM, for example, how they are doing, and they are shifting, and that their result is especially interesting because they're shifting their focus primarily from Europe-based delivery to India-based delivery now, right? So they are increasing their India footprint very significantly. We'll go on discussing about certain companies as and when they come, but just wanted to highlight a few things here about these companies. Surprisingly, I mean, LTTS posted surprisingly good numbers this quarter. KPIT also posted good numbers. HCL Tech, primarily from their softwares and platforms perspective, there was a degrowth, which was, to be very honest, not very surprising, but it was a kind of expected. Um, but let's see. I mean, we can go on discuss about overall sector as such, but just wanted to mention before we get into a company specific discussion that the overall composition of this IT and the technology as a trend is changing so fast. So if you were interested in IT services company because of the uptick in the cloud revenue, suddenly you would see that your investments are not going anywhere. But there are pockets, the companies like Newgen and PSTs and RS Softwares, these are performing phenomenally well, and that's where the alpha is getting generated. And then you further come down to the AI, and you see anything related to the digital transformation or AI workload execution, compute provide, digital infra. All these companies are, again, that's where the alpha is. So you have to be on continuous outlook of and keep track exactly, where the water is flowing and how exactly is the composition changing. Um, I would just say before I conclude, and then maybe we can open the floor for the discussion. I see Saurabh is also there, so we can take his feedback also. But I will just say this that IT earlier was very vanilla solution service providers, then it slowly changed to the productized services. 2020 saw the cloud adoption and sudden raise of the cloud and being independent. of the on-premise solutions. Then we are currently foreseeing the uptick in the Gen AI. Um, so, this there is a tremendous opportunity for Gen AI in the SME space as well. So, if you're tracking the space and the startup space especially, you should really follow certain handles on Twitter. There is a company called as Bharat Agri who is building some very interesting solutions using AI on soil testing. They help farmers identify what is the missing micronutrient within the soil, what kind of produce that they should be, taking. There are these companies, for example, Setu is building India's own LLM for BFSI with Sarvam AI. There are companies like John AIC which are building, let's say, personal AI compute, right, that you can carry with yourself. There are companies like Vigyan Labs, which are building micro data centers, and they claim that half of India's notifications are enabled through their platform. So basically, if you put India and its digital growth, the emergence of the new technology, the enablement to the lowest layer in the industry, the consumer is also, getting tech driven. So the companies also have to adopt, right? So there is tremendous scope for the technology as a sector per se, but not necessarily you will find the frontline IT companies getting benefited out of that changing trend, right? And then maybe we can take some, how do I say, feedback from Saurabh. I see he's there. Welcome, Saurabh. Bhai.
Hi, Mabhai. Hi, Prince. Hope I'm audible.
Yep.
Hi, Saurabh, you are.
Yeah, hi, yeah. So sorry I missed, I think, first 10 minutes, joined little late, but I heard Ameya saying, the last few lines on, the differentiated businesses doing well. And this is the time for differentiated businesses in terms of products, software, services. And I totally agree because most of the times the discussions happens around the same services company, and we all look at the IT index and the performance of the IT index and the performance of when we take list of companies, because IT is more than 150 plus companies. There could be a lot of difference because of difference in the business models, and it might be that the IT index may or may not do that well, and we should not have very big expectation also because the composition of the IT index comes from big services companies which can't do beyond 8 9 10%. That is how the business is structured. That is how the global IT growth rate flows into global services growth rate, flows into global IT outsourcing, flows into India. But you have lots and lots of interesting companies coming up. Even in services, when you look in services, there are segments which grow at 5% and there are segments which grow at 20%. So just blindly looking at PE and telling this company is costly or this company is cheap, until unless you understand in which segment of IT in services companies are, like the geospatial analytics and all, even service analytics, these have very different kind of growth rate and different trajectory of future. So that is how we need to look at company by company rather than blindly looking at the IT sector index. So I totally agree with Amya, but yeah, I will leave the floor to open the question so that we can be more question specific while answering. And thanks Amya bhai, thanks Prince for giving me opportunity.
So Sandeep and Vicky, if you have any quick
Yeah,
questions or anything,
yeah. So can you hear me?
Vicky wants to. Okay, chalo. आप बोल दिया
Y-
तो quickly you can do.
Yeah. So I just want to know your view on the HGS, the Hinduja Global Service company. I think this is a Hinduja Group company, and this is a IT company which is available at available at less than the cash they have. They have more than 5,000 crore cash, and the market cap is around 3,500 something. So any views on this HGS?
I don't actively track HGS, to be honest. So can't really give any specific feedback on that. If Saurabh is tracking or if Sandeep Bhai, I see he's here. If anybody else is tracking, they can chip in probably. But I don't track HGS, to be very honest.
So there are times when you don't track a company because you have never come across, and there are times when you don't track a company because of reasons you don't want to track. So, there are certain business groups or companies where the history of governance has been so bad that whatever price it is available, you are never interested to track. So that is where I would like to categorize this company. So my suggestion would be to go and study the corporate governance history. So there is a reason why some companies they track cheaper.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thanks, Vicky. Yes, Sandeep bhai.
No, more to probably. Hey, sort of glad that we met first time probably, and I mean, just to engage into a further discussion on this and taking business part little out of it. A question where I want feedback from both of you is that why Indian IT cannot attract kind of multiples which let's say Indian FMCG or MNC space does. And when I look into FMCG or MNC, the core argument is the continuity of, I'll say, like predictability of revenue history as well as profitability. Typically expected good quality governance. Most of them MNCs are, even all FMCG big players are quality companies in a way. And on top of it, in IT, the tier one at least, you get huge dividends and cash buyback. So I understand these companies can no longer, because of sheer size and because the market share game is limited. They cannot grow at high 20s or 30s anymore. Impossible, pretty much. Like through the cycle, if they can do mid teens, even that is great, right? But at the same time, the fact that balance sheets are clean, huge cash flow generation, you do regular dividend and buybacks. I sometimes wonders why some of these companies don't get the kind of multiples which you see in mid caps and in small caps on quality companies, or even mid-teen growing kind of companies. And the only probable reason I can think of is that some of these global fund managers as well as big fund managers have taken a 20-year call for India exposure on, let's say, HUL or some of these names, where they are very comfortable that 2045 also these companies will be here. There won't be any concern, and you'll get a India notional GDP growth capture via these stocks very well. But probably street is not that confident about Indian IT. And this gap has been there earlier also, when probably people or street would have been less cynical about longevity of some of these models. So last 5-10 years, like every 5 years, people question on the survival of Indian IT, and we have already proved street wrong at least few times. First on the cloud, then second on big data. All these words, like there was a huge talk that Indian IT caliber is not as much as let's say Western world, and we won't be able to catch that. So we are able to adopt, but this again AI. That is one. And second thing is maybe Saurabh and Ameya for you is there a possibility that in next 5 years employees might reduce or stagnate, but revenue per employee growth as well as profit per employee growth will increase? In a sense, there is a non-linear play which all these IT companies always talk, but they rarely deliver. But this time it is more of less of an aspiration, more of an majburi, like a compulsion for them to do that, right? So with help of AI tools, do you see Indian IT services as a bucket industry able to adopt some of these tools so well, internalize it in enterprise environment where the productivity improves? So business metrics are fine, even though per employee or at an employee level it is probably a more stressful period. So on that also, but first maybe on the multiples. Saurabh, any thoughts from you?
Okay, so the only thing probably that I think, Sandeep bhai, and I can be completely wrong because I don't track broader macros and the other sectors, and why FMCG receives such high multiples, like you already described. The reason probably being fund managers who have taken the call. But what I see is the Indian IT service, at least the frontline companies, uh, the the key differentiator here could be the source of the demand for the from the both sectors, right? For FMCG, uh, the source of the demand is domestic, and for IT, at least the frontline IT, we are quite largely dependent on how the Western economies are performing. If they are performing really well, we will have IT companies proliferating. At least the frontline IT companies will keep on reporting sequential 4%, 5% kind of a growth, which is phenomenal, and that's what exactly the street expects them to perform. So maybe because there is a very significant dependency in terms of and Indian IT industry has been prominently BFSI driven in the past. So if the US economy or the European economy, not much European, but if the US economy is not doing really well, and if there is spend cuts or if there is any dampening in the sentiments about the spends, future spends in the US BFSI space, you would see that Indian IT companies they can go into a very long slumber, and that is why a lot of people talk about and wait for the IT rate cuts in US. Sorry, the rate cuts, not IT, the rate cuts in the US. So that is probably one reason I can think of, that for the growth of these companies, we are not kind of domestic focused. We are still focused outwards. Probably that is the reason that these companies don't get multiple. But there are periods when we saw the sudden demand in the cloud space in 2020, 21. These companies did receive very significantly high multiples, and it's just that since that demand has tapered off, it's not that the demand is falling, but it's normalizing. So there are not enough contracts up for grabs now as they were back in 2021, for example. So because of that, we are kind of seeing the retracement of that multiple to the little lower level. But this is how I broadly see. If you see some of the companies that are domestically focused, and that is why the TCS result is especially interesting. The moment they kind of changed their primary focus on the US markets to Middle Eastern and the India domestic opportunities, they did come back and reported a decent quarter-on-quarter sequential growth, right? So the companies who are domestically focused, there is enough demand as of now. So that could be one of the reasons. But if Saurabh has any other thoughts, I'm open to learn about it.
Thanks, Ameya bhai. So valuation is a very subjective topic, and I mean, let me first admit that for me, the reason to learn technical itself was because of valuation, I couldn't time what I wanted to do. So, given that background of my limited understanding of valuation, here are my added points to whatever Ramya bhai says, and I agree. So one thing is we when we are comparing the valuation, and let's say in the FMCG, let's take the bigger company in FMCG HUL, and let us take the bigger companies in IT like TCS. Now, we always have a kind of recent time frame perspective. But even if we look at history of HUL, the underperformance has been for 8 9 years, and 2000 to 2009 it used to trade at a, I think, around 25 to 35 p, and then 2010 to 20 we had a wave of where FMCG companies performed, and especially in 18 19 we had this quality wave where people felt only quality companies are worth investing because of whatever happened in 17 18. And the same HUL got a valuation, if I remember, around 80, Asian Paint around 90 100. And then again, if we look since then, I mean, HDFC, Kotak, HUL, Asian Paints, these were companies where people were justifying any valuation. That ये तो lower 15% compounding ऐसे ही आता है. And then we look at last 4 5 years from again 2019, the quality has not deserved, and whether you look at Asian Paints or you look at HUL, the valuations have come down by 30%. So like HUL is down from 80 to 50, same way Asian Paints is down. I don't know in next 4 5 years whether again it will go from 50 to 80, or it will come down from 50 to 30 back, like what happened in 2000, 2 to 2010. But yeah, so I agree that always FMCG has got a higher valuation compared to IT, but the width, the gap of that gap keeps fluctuating, and there could be reasons like themes and all these things why sometimes this gap is high, sometimes this gap is low, but no denying that it has got a higher valuation. So with that background of this gap being volatile, if we try to understand why this gap If I try to think academically, and let's break this whole valuation into a discounted cash flow, where usually we try to take the years when we have some visibility over the business, and then we try to give kind of perpetuity growth rate. When we try to break most of the businesses, this is my rough mota moti sense, that 40 to 45, 50% of the valuation comes in first 10 years of cash flows, and rest of the whole valuation comes because of perpetuity growth rate of 3-4%, whatever we take. Now, coming to IT, this terminal growth rate side, which is where the risk of technology and disruption and uncertainty is, which we have seen every 5-6 years. Something we will discuss in technology and the IT sector companies will get written off, right from the whole dot com problem to 2008 to 2006 to 16 machine learning coming to 2000, now people talking about AI disrupting. But there is something which happens every 4-5 years which creates uncertainty in the mind over the sector, which will have a question over the terminal value, which means 50% part of the valuation. But these kind of questions are usually never raised on FMCG, because उसका simple logic यही होता है कि खाना तो खाते ही रहेंगे और जिंदा रहेंगे, ये companies चलती रहेंगी. So that could be one reason why. But I agree, I mean, if we look at the sector which has best corporate, and of course IT is mixed, but I am talking about more about the bigger companies. I mean, the bigger well established companies, these are one of the cleanest companies, where the buybacks happen, dividends happen. I find very few sectors which are as professional and in terms of governance and all. But this is one reason. The second reason, I think Ameya bhai touched upon it, the dependence on the Western economies. So when we talk of FMCG, maybe if you remove a Godrej which relies on Africa and all, most of the FMCG companies are domestically focused. But when we look at the IT sector, and big companies represent bulk of the IT sector, so what is our global IT growth rate? The global IT growth rate, if you take the average of services, it's around 3.5%. I mean, you got a growth rate of 8%, 10%, that has happened 2-3 times in 25 years. But the mean growth rate is 3.5%. And what is the global IT outsourcing services growth rate? That is around 5-6%. And if India is getting a bigger share of it, it might be 7%, 8%. So, you have your growth rate defined, and then these kind of volatilities and dependence of the growth rate on global spending in IT services, which is, of course, the Asian and the Indian growth rate is higher than how this global growth rate comes. So, whether you take a terminal value, whether you take a risk of uncertainty, because valuation is not only about earnings, but it also about the consistency, uncertainty, all the things, and the relative dependence of the growth driver being the Indian economy versus the global growth rate. And of course, that width of that valuation gap shrinking and expanding. Taking all of this, these could be the reasons why FMCG always trades at higher. How much higher is always debatable, but trades at higher. So that's my view. These could be the reason.
And thanks, both of you. I surely don't want to, divert this discussion, because I'm sure a lot of people want to hear more, business-specific discussion. But agree with you, Saurabh. I mean, I think this perennial discussion or continuous questioning on the survival of the sector or longevity of the sector is bigger reason. The growth, external export-oriented, that is a good point. But at least last 10 years, what has happened is none of these tier one companies we ever talked very highly. I mean, these were always considered business laggards. But even in this so-called laggard period, Indian IT has gained 10% market share compared to even more laggard, European American players. So as long as we believe that IT is also a utility like power and infra, which I believe, and then probably obviously it's not a consensus view. I feel like that this model will, continue to survive like FMCG, power, utility. And then second thing is when we are talking about 5-6% kind of a, dollar returns, a dollar growth, and you add another 1-2% of, operational excellence in a sense of, market share gains at an industry level. Obviously, you have Wipro and then you have Infosys, and there is always a volatility here and there. You add another 4-5% of INR, so we are still talking about lower teens kind of a visibility for 10 years, 20 years, or at least 10-15 years kind of a thing. And that is what I get in Dover and Marico also. So, but we can leave it here. So we can talk some other day. Glad that you explained so well. And back to you, Ameya. Ameya, maybe if you want to take that revenue, I mean, whether the implies shrinkage, but your business performance may still be fine. So any early scenes you are seeing about the adoption of some of these IT tools and whether that will add to the productivity and that can take care of, some of the disruptions we are talking about.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's it.
sure. I actually see that happening, Sandeep bhai, to be very honest, and especially within the large enterprise software space. Um, this is happening in certain pockets, especially around, you know, um, so, for example, there are two pockets where this is primarily happening. One is the system migration from the older versions to the newer versions. Basically, what we talk about either system convergence or let's say the modernization play, right? So, one pocket of the opportunity is that, and the second one is basically um, so the edge and the repetitive processes within the overall software delivery or the solution delivery, right? So and सबसे पहले जब हम उसके बारे में बात करते हैं तो सबसे पहली चीज जो दिमाग में आती है दैट इज द टेस्टिंग, राइट? सो आपका जो सपोर्ट वाला पूरा ऑपरेशंस है, आपका टिकटिंग सिस्टम जो होता है क्रिएट होता है, एसएलए मेंटेनेंस, notification management, workflow management, automating certain tasks within the broader workflow. ये सारी चीजों में ऑटोमेशन ऑलरेडी बहुत सिग्निफिकेंटली स्टार्ट हो चुका था पहले ही. But I will give you a very brief about how this is bringing in productivity gains. So when you talk about, let's say, a modernization of a very complex system based on SAP, which is, let's say, in the lower version called as ECC, and now the ECC as a product is coming to the end of its life. In a couple of years, SAP will stop supporting ECC, and basically, what does that mean is everybody is transforming into onto S4, which is a newer version of SAP. Naturally, what happens is you have a productive system on ECC, so you have to start thinking about how do I migrate my existing data. You talk about the master data, you talk about the transactional data. Within the transactional data, you have lot of open documents. You have you have a custom code base that I mean, the customer, when I say you, the customer has developed over, let's say, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, right? And the developers who built that code, there was not a single developer. There used to be multiple developers. They came, they went. The development documentation is not really great, or if it is great, in some cases, especially in European landscape, the documentation is not in English. It's maintained in a variety of different languages based on where the product team is based out of. So ये challenges बहुत है, and especially in this pocket, what happens is it's a headache to migrate a legacy code base and modernize it to ensure that there are no gaps, you don't break anything. So because कई बार ऐसा होता है, right? So टेक्नोलॉजी स्पेसिफिकली हम लोग बात करते हैं तो पुराने प्रोडक्ट वर्जन में कोई एपीआई है तो वो नए प्रोडक्ट वर्जन में वो नहीं होगी, वो ऑब्सोलीट की गई होगी. So and if you don't change that specifically, you will see that your entire code base fails. So there are productivity tools which some of the big companies that they have developed. What they do is that they reverse engineer everything. They look at the legacy code base. They look at what is there in the in the modern code base. Uh, उसके comparison करके they identify, they go to the code, they identify कौन से classes किस जगह पे impact हुए हैं, क्या change करना है, कहाँ change करना है, ये class change करोगे तो कहाँ impact आएगा. Based on that, the solution architect decides, okay, how do I really want to take actions. अगर आप ट्रेडिशनल वे से काम करने जाओगे तो probably this things takes at least couple of months to 3 months, right? 2 से 3 महीना कम से कम लगता है. But with these tools which I have seen, it happens in, let's say, a couple of weeks itself. So initial आपका जो वो टूल रन होता है, आपको रिजल्ट्स अवेलेबल होते हैं 1-2 दिन में, एंड देन उसके बाद आपको भी उसके ऊपर एक्शन करना है. It also, these tools are also capable to go back and generate all the SDLC artifacts. Like उससे आपको कट ओवर टास्क लिस्ट जनरेट करनी है, उसके बेसिस पे आपको टेस्ट केसेस जनरेट करने हैं. वो टेस्ट केसेस का आपका जो टेस्ट मैनेजमेंट डेवलपमेंट प्लेटफॉर्म है उसके साथ आपको इंटीग्रेशन करना है, या फिर आपका जो भी टिकटिंग सिस्टम है उसके साथ इंटीग्रेशन करना है, कहीं इंटरफेसिंग करना है, या फिर if you are using Scrum और Agile तो आपकी यूजर स्टोरीज भी वो जनरेट करके दे देगा और स्टोरी पॉइंट्स भी बना के दे देगा अपने आप. सो ये चीजें टिपिकली एक जो प्रोजेक्ट मैनेजर करता है, ये टूल्स कंप्लीटली ऑटोमेट कर रही हैं. एंड दीज टूल्स आर very, very close to productive usage. I expect within couple of quarters काफी सारी companies ये tools use करना काफी सारी मतलब जो काम कर रही हैं उसके ऊपर these tools will come out. The biggies like Accenture and all they already have these tools in production. So हाँ I mean I'm very positive about the productivity gains in this space. Co-pilots भी काफी जगह पे आ रहे हैं. We talked about co-pilot also, right? So yeah, I expect a productivity gains, significant productivity gains. बट ये टूल्स को एक्सेस एक कॉमन डेवलपर को फिलहाल उतना नहीं है जितना होना चाहिए. सो अभी जो चल रहा है वो इट्स प्राइमरीली अबाउट creating the awareness about the fundamental things around generative AI. People are still learning how to do prompt, right? So prompt engineering के trainings चल रही हैं. So all these things are happening, and what we are talking about tools and all that, that's little advanced thing. And ब्रॉड लेवल पे डेवलपर और ओवरऑल इंडस्ट्री के पब्लिक का अंडरस्टैंडिंग उस लेवल पे आके वो सारे टूल्स को प्रोडक्टिवली यूज करने को प्रॉब्ली कपल ऑफ क्वार्टर्स लगेंगे मुझे मेरे हिसाब से. दैट टू इज अ वेरी ऑप्टिमिस्टिक एक्सपेक्टेशन. बट यस देयर इज काफी अच्छा काम हो रहा है उसमें. वेरी ऑनेस्ट. एंड एक चीज और संदीप भाई मैं बोलूंगा, जस्ट आपका जो एफएमसीजी वाला पॉइंट था ना, आप अगर इंडिया स्पेसिफिक कंपनीज देखोगे ना, फॉर एग्जांपल अपना जो इंडिया स्टैक है या डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है या यूपीआई स्टैक है या इंडिया स्पेसिफिक बीएफएसआई या फिर इंडिया स्पेसिफिक फिनटेक है या इंडिया स्पेसिफिक कोई ऑटोमेशन वर्क वर्कफ्लो ऑटोमेशन और लेट्स से इंफॉर्मेशन लाइफ साइकिल ऑटोमेशन या इंडिया डोमेस्टिक स्पेसिफिक कोई एनालिटिक्स है या जियोस्पैटियल एनालिटिक्स है, या फिर आपका कंप्यूट और एग्जीक्यूट है. ये जो जो जहां कहाँ इंडिया स्पेसिफिक है वहां वहां यू विल फाइंड लॉट ऑफ कंपनीज गेटिंग इवन हायर मल्टीपल्स देन एफएमसीजी मल्टीपल्स, राइट? सो न्यूजेन हो गया, जेनेसिस हो गया, सीएनसिस हो गया, आपका मैपमा इंडिया हो गया. देन there are quite a few companies which are operating. एनपीएसटी हो गया फॉर एग्जांपल जो पेमेंट स्टैक में अवेलेबल है फिलहाल. आरएस सॉफ्टवेयर हो गया, ई2ई हो गया, आपका नेटवेब हो गया. सो जो डोमेस्टिकली फोकस्ड है उनको तो मल्टीपल मिल रहा है एफएमसीजी से भी ज्यादा मेरे हिसाब से. एंड आई थिंक इट्स डायरेक्टली कनेक्टेड विद द सोर्स ऑफ द डिमांड एज वी टॉक्ड अबाउट.
No,
नॉट
fair
श्योर
enough.
इफ
I
इट
mean,
answers.
surely I will not extend it so that others benefit from your time. The quickly on this productivity thing, one hunch I have, and then I may just correct, and then I'll surely go on listener mode. Otherwise, I'll end up hijacking time for others. Is that I get a feeling that all these big product players, let's say SAP ecosystem or Oracle ecosystem or Salesforce, Microsoft, everyone is building AI components within their existing products, and they are already in huge development phase. And once that happens, there will be a decent way of re-implementation. I mean, implementation, re-implementation, etc., or upgrades, software upgrades have been less on this now. So that's why the work for Indian IT will probably be less than compared to, let's say, what it used to be in 10 years when basically work used to come SAP 1.2 to 2.2. I mean, simple, right? You take another 9 months to do that. That cycle has surely shrunk, but even then, I anticipate that Indian IT services might be just like beneficiary of that. I mean, yesterday I tweeted, I'll probably tweet here again. Gartner is talking about 10% kind of an IT outsourcing growth, and knowing Gartner, like they do a lot of vendor surveys. It's not like some MBA guys anticipating something based on Google search. So they are seeing again that need for IT services at least like this year, which is after 2 years they are talking about that kind of a growth coming back. And the only probable reason can be all these AI tools. While product companies are investing heavily, it's like a survival thing for them, but end of the day implementation across enterprises will fall back on some of these services providers, where again the core play is that Indian IT is probably tad smarter, tad better than IBMs and Capgemini's and EPAM of the world. So that has been the play in last 10 years, where Indian IT as a
Yeah,
bucket
absolutely.
large sorry. So that is what maybe little thought on that, and then back to Prince and other speakers.
नहीं नहीं ये एब्सोल्यूट मेरे हिसाब से दिस इज वेरी गुड रीडिंग बिकॉज इफ यू सी क्लाउड वाज आल्सो अराउंड फॉर अ क्वाइट अ लॉन्ग टाइम, राइट? तो ये क्लाउड के स्पेस में कैपेबिलिटी बिल्डिंग हो गया, या फिर आपका खुद का कोई यूएसपी बिल्ड करना हो गया, या कोई एक्विजिशन करना हो गया, ये अपनी जो फ्रंटलाइन कंपनीज थी इन्होंने 2018-2019 तक ऑलरेडी करके रखा था. देन केम द सडन flow of the cloud demand, and they were absolutely ready to take whatever pie that was available, right? So ये frontline companies के पास में इतना ज्यादा काम था, they were not able to service the contracts within the same quarter. So that's when they started passing on. So percolating demand काफी end तक जाके गई. Similar thing ये AI के जो especially enterprise software में I completely agree with you, because eventually the implementation part उसका start होने के बाद में all the beneficiaries will be our this Indian IT companies. And of course, उसका gestational period है. Cloud को probably it took 10 years for industry to kind of embrace it. But AI के लिए उतना time नहीं लगेगा. Probably couple of years down the line, and we should see uptake again coming through a different segment. तो पहले cloud से आया, अब AI से आएगा. तो at least enterprise software space में I fully agree with your reading, Sandeep bhai. No doubt.
Okay, thanks. Back to you, Prince, and other speakers.
Thanks, Sandeep. So, Raksha, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. I've joined a couple of these sessions. They're quite informative. I had a few things to go back on the point that was made about, like, the companies within the IT sector, like Setu and Bharat Agro. I think if I've heard those names correctly. Is there any way we can get that list, like, if one wants to study? Is
Yeah, so there
that
are
list?
some, yeah. So either the way to do this and the way I do this is basically there are certain events that keep on happening. So there is a handle on Twitter called as People Plus AI, and they conducted a conference, I think, last month. And in that conference, a lot of these companies participated. Setu was one. John AIC was also one of the participants. But when you start following, let's say, one handle, and eventually you also expand to the ecosystem and the contributors within that ecosystem, slowly, as over a period of time, you also come across what other companies that are contributing to that. So I use LinkedIn. I use these kind of handles who talk primarily about AI. So People Plus AI, they also have a community on WhatsApp. So you can join that, and they keep on discussing about what startup is doing what. So that is one of the very good ways to keep a track on the companies from the startup space. I hope
Understood.
that
Thanks.
answers.
Thanks. And one last point. There's a lot of talk about, like, profit per employee and, like, productivity gains and all that with Gen AI and all that. But I'm sure there is somewhere the factor of, like, either sectoral demand, like, so if you talk about BFSI, somebody mentioned about it. So there's definitely, like, some Gartner reports or some study suggests that finance sector is going to be a bit more cautioned in use of it because of various challenges, like, data security and all that. But there are other sectors where Gen AI has got more demand. So I'm sure, like, the companies that will be catering to those verticals will be either on the gain, or they will be kind of, like, focusing more towards, like, how to circumvent or mitigate those challenges, because obviously you're talking about DevSecOps and you're talking about security, data challenges and all that. So I think that does play. Any thoughts on this point?
Yeah, sure. So see, whenever there is a new technology that is trying to become a mainstream, there are two types of industries. Let's say there are two categories in which industries usually fall into. There are certain companies जो उनके business nature के वजह से they fall on the edge. They are not part, let's say, of the core business processes, and some of the companies who are part of the core business processes, so like you said, BFSI and so on. And what happens is within these two, there are some leaders. When I say leaders, they are the technology adoption leaders. So they adopt
Mm,
the technology head on, even when the technology is relatively immature. There are not enough, let's say, how would I say, um, enough academic research already happened translating into tools and frameworks, enough case studies, enough client
mm,
testimonials. So point is, जब तक technology उतनी mature नहीं है, there are still some companies who kind of take that risk,
mm,
take the technological change head on, and then they try to bring the productivity gains. This
Hmm.
especially happens जहाँ कहाँ पे आप edge processes पे काम कर रहे हो, workflow automation हो गया, आपका testing automation हो गया,
Hmm.
आपका warehousing logistic हो गया. Of course, I mean this impacts very significantly to your business performance, but in some pockets you can definitely take these tools and take some risk of implementing. As
Hmm.
and when over a period of time the technology matures, uh, customers के experiences आना शुरू हो जाते हैं, कोई बड़ा player within that sector adopts that, and then over a period of time the industry looks at that player and the way that they have adopted the technology, उसका outcome कैसा रहा है, उसमें से क्या सीखना है, क्या नहीं सीखना है, and then the companies who are not really keen on being part of that leaders side, they are followers. They wait for technology to mature, and it happens everywhere. It happens in the product space, especially in the enterprise software space. It happens. It happened with cloud. Cloud was there since 2009, 2010. In any kind of a product, if you're launching any, let's say, a product within the BFSI or a fintech space, people really not very keen to change what is working really well, right? So, और इंडिया में स्पेशली ये हमेशा बोला जाता है कि जो अच्छे से चल रहा है उसको चेंज करने का ट्राई मत करो.
Hmm.
Don't
True.
break something which is working really well, right? So in
Hmm.
such cases, these companies becomes the follower, and then they wait for the technology to be mature, more people to come out who are offering services. So आपका पूरा landscape mature हो जाता है, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
vendor base mature हो जाता है, and then it's easy to source talent also in that case. If you want to build, let's say, a captive talent pool within your own company for that, it's easy to source the talent because वो talent भी reskill हो चुका है, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So
And plus
some
the
industries will
ancillary.
adopt it first, some will adopt towards, tad end of that. So it's just the
Hmm.
nature of the adoption of the tech.
And I think it's also like, how much of the adoption has been validated, which you rightly pointed out. And plus the fact that the ancillary, I mentioned about DevSecOps and security. And I see like, those companies which who are niche players into kind of like, in that space, they will also mature. And that I think also kind of brings, I would not say no, the confidence, but at least you've got now more uh, to play around with. Like, you can strengthen the framework, you can strengthen the adoption roadmap.
Definitely.
Mm. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, can I speak?
Bhavin, please wait. I'll call
Hello?
names. So
Hello?
Farshad, you can go
Yeah.
next, and then Harshil, Pranjal, and Bhavin in that order.
Okay, great. Hi, Emma. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So, Ameya, my question is just around understanding capabilities of one of the company, and it's Orion Pro. So I've been invested in it for quite some time, and I have a good understanding of its, the SaaS product vertical. So one of the new spaces that they have gotten into is the data center consulting service. So just wanted to share my understanding and, just ask the question, is this going in the right direction, right? Because what they mentioned today is they do consulting and planning, which is site selection, feasibility studies, etc. Then design and engineering, where they come up with the architecture and other sort of engineering, load planning, and then finally the construction services, where the project management, construction management comes in. So in the data center value chain, if I can sort of take, because you were talking about SAP, just parallels. So it would be like an SAP implementation where Accenture would come in and do the business case, and then the architecture roadmap, and then the PMO, and someone like Infosys would come in and do the actual implementation. So just taking the parallel in the data center space, will they be the Accentures, and someone like Techno, who is a data center EPC, would be the parallel of Infosys here? So is that sort of where they fit in the entire value chain? So that is part one, and just quickly the part two as well. uh, how is this space? Because if I were to study this space a little bit more, who would be the peers in the data center consulting space for Orient Pro? Is this space crowded? If you happen to know about it, is this a good space that they have gotten into? So just around the positioning in the value chain, and then just to understand if this is actually a good space in the entire data center value chain. Just these two
Mhm.
questions, and thank you.
Very interesting. So be very honest with you, I don't see Orient Pro to be Accenture of this space because see the thing is this company has been primarily a software company or anything related to the IT and technology. When it comes to site selection and let's say the design and the layouts and where you should be keeping your UPS, the kind of redundancies that you should plan, ये काफी स्पेशलाइज्ड सर्विसेज हैं और यहाँ पे जो expertise, for example, someone like Techno Electric or for example L&T would bring in, you cannot really match with the consultancy and the quality of that consultancy when an IT company is getting into that and doing a site selection, to be very honest. Likewise, someone who has primarily the electromechanical capabilities or the power capabilities, that company will certainly not be able to, advise on what kind of interconnectivity between the two GPU cores you should have, what should be the rack composition. So मेरा understanding ऐसा है कि there is not one player who is gonna come and kind of lead this. But even let's say we go by understanding that the clients would require someone to take the lead, do the consultancy, bring in the vendors in different value chains. In that case, probably I would go with someone who has a long history of doing project executions. And project execution फिर आपका वो जो basically फैक्ट्री लगाना, आपका उसका layout design करना, and everything associated with that. So the someone like of L&T probably, so some services L&T can come in and say, hey, because L&T has been doing this for a long period of time, right? So they had a offering called as factory as a service. You just come and tell them that, मुझे इस चीज का factory लगाना है, and they'll do the site selection for you. They do the plant design, plant engineering. They also take care of everything around that, right? So पूरा functioning करके वो factory आपके हाथ में वो दे देंगे. So obviously not all the pockets L&T will be serving, and then they can reissue the contracts to the vendors who are specialized within the space. For example, for the power and electromechanical, let's say Techno can be roped in. But when it comes to building, let's say your server and compute, some other company can be roped in. But I don't see an IT company being a primary consultant यहाँ पे, because it's just not their domain. एक IT company solution architecture कर सकता है, and when we say that, for example, Accenture and Deloitte, they come in, they do the consultancy, they do the initial design, but the implementation is done by, let's say, Infosys and TCS, but you are still within the broadly within IT itself, right? बट नाउ जब हम डेटा सेंटर कंसल्टेंसी की बात करते हैं, यहाँ पे रियल एस्टेट का पार्ट आता है, आपका इंजीनियरिंग का पार्ट आता है, आपका काफी सारी बाकी टेक्नोलॉजीज आती है, राइट? सो ये मेरा पर्सनल व्यू है. आफ्टर यू डिस्क्राइब्ड, आई डोंट ट्रैक द कंपनी, बट आफ्टर यू डिस्क्राइब्ड, आई डोंट think an IT company can be the primary consulting driver of this.
Okay, clear, Ameya. Thanks. Probably, that gives me an indication as to, where I need to focus on. Thanks for your answer. Very clear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harshad.
Yeah.
Harshal, you can.
Hi, Prince, and hi, Ameya. Good evening. So just wanted to understand your view on emphasis, because what I see right now, emphasis is doing a lot of acquisitions in AI space, and they have a good presence in BFSI sector. So as you know that Oracle Finance has posted a good results, right? What is your view on emphasis? Because I don't belong to the IT background, so so I don't have much understanding. So I would be, if I would be grateful if you could throw some light on that. Thank you.
Sure, sure. So, see, when so Emphasis was one of the prominent names within the overall IT services industry back until at least 2010, 2014, if I'm not wrong. But somehow, उसके बाद से they kind of fell back on the entire value chain, and since they are just trying to catch up. I'll just tell you something. They are on a office closing spree within the Europe. काफी सारा इन लोगों का जो offices था यूरोप में, they are shutting it down. I don't know what is the reason that they are doing, but what I've heard is they have a stack of different operations, right? So they have application services, They have AI and cloud, obviously, that everybody will have, and then they have the product modernization stack as well. So within the application services vertical, in the business process and business services, and also the cognitive and the DevOps services, they have been on uh, they have closed quite a few offices. I don't know why they have done that. I don't track the company that closely. If there is something that specifically interests you, I'm more than happy to answer. But if you look at मोटा मोटी इन लोगों को offering अगर आप देखोगे within the cloud, again they have AWS, Azure, GCP, VMware, almost everybody else has that. Salesforce हो गया, Microsoft का Center of Excellence है इन लोगों का. They do product engineering. Everyone else is doing. So what I'm trying to drive the point as कि यहाँ पे कोई ऐसा unique positioning नहीं है जिसके वजह से मार्केट इसको कोई प्रीमियम देना चाहेगा. और आईटी स्पेस में एक्विजिशन किसी भी तरह से काम कर सकता है. It can go really well, it can go really wrong, and we have more examples of things going really wrong than things going really good. Yeah. जब आपके पास में आप ER&D में आते हो तो probably acquisition going right का चांस ज्यादा होता है. But IT services में we have historical data to prove कि acquisitions को पूरा kind of gestational period होता है. It takes time for the synergies to come out, right? So probably that is the reason market is not really giving it a premium that investors are expecting it to. But कोई differentiated positioning नहीं है यहाँ पे. You have again agile IT ops, experience design, cyber security. But like I said, right, this is a templatized offering. Even if they are doing some of the acquisitions, when will those acquisitions start contributing to the top line and कितना synergy उसमें से आता है, that is something to be seen.
Okay, Ameya. Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Ameya, one question from the comments. So, Rahul Gadkari is asking, how do you look at the total addressable market for kind of work KPIT is doing? Also, the space already looks crowded. What's your thoughts around that?
Now my turn.
Bhavin, please wait.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, yes. So basically, Rahul Gadkari is asking Ameya, how do you look at the total addressable market for kind of work KPIT is doing? Also, the space already looks crowded. What's your thoughts around it?
Uh, yeah, even though the space is crowded, but KPIT is kind of on the right direction. ये मेरा personal opinion है. They did some really good acquisitions within the Europe. Like I said, right? So जब आपका ER&D का बात आता है, product engineering का बात आता है, the kind of innovation and the source of innovation of the product innovation has always been Europe and let's say US and some pockets of China. I don't track China that closely, but Europe में when it comes to the automobile ER&D especially और manufacturing ER&D यहाँ पे काफी काफी primary innovators बहुत सारे हैं, right? And KPIT ने काफी strategic acquisitions किए हैं यहाँ पे to keep themselves ahead of the competition, right? So पहले KPIT काफी specific roadmap लेके काम करता था, but now they are part of the overall value chain of a software-defined vehicle. So there are multiple categories within an SDF that you can monetize over a period of time. ये आप कब कर पाओगे? जब आपको किसी भी सॉफ्टवेयर डिफाइंड व्हीकल हो गया या कोई भी ऑटोमेशन व्हीकल या एनी व्हीकल दैट इज कनेक्टेड has significant software related components that are driving the overall vehicle. You require control over the Ethernet and the network of that system, right? So they acquired a company called Technica Engineering, and they are expert in the vehicle networking. So if you imagine it as a body full of nerves, vein, muscles, then you should see Technica as an MRI machine that can tell you precisely what's happening and where. So they are also growing and harnessing the network level capabilities within this space, right? So even though the market is crowded, probably it is crowded just the way it is on the lower strata of the pyramid. But when you come to what KPIT is doing and the kind of acquisitions that they are doing, the way they are growing, especially in Europe, it's very good. So I'll tell you something which is very special about Europe and the product engineering, manufacturing, and all these kind of things. So the access to this market is controlled by language. बाकी किसी चीज का barrier नहीं है, right? That is why you will see a lot of small companies who have really good focus on US markets, for example. वो सारे मिडिल ईस्टर्न कंट्रीज में जाते हैं या फिर अफ्रीका कंट्रीज में जाते हैं, बट दे स्ट्रगल व्हेन इट कम्स टू यूरोप बिकॉज आपका सारा जो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इंटरनल टीम्स का वर्किंग होता है वो स्पेसिफिक लैंग्वेज में होता है. एंड यूरोप में स्पेशली व्हेन इट कम्स टू द प्रोडक्ट इनोवेशन, प्रोडक्ट इंजीनियरिंग, ER&D स्पेस में देयर आर मेनी स्मॉल स्मॉल बुटीक कंसल्टिंग फर्म्स हु हैव एक्सेप्शनल वैल्यू ऑन द टेबल. So if you know exactly कि आपको किस डायरेक्शन में ग्रो करना है, and if you are able to acquire, let's say a good company within this space, um, over a period of time, after एक साल भर के बाद में आपको उसका एक्चुअली इफेक्ट दिखना शुरू हो जाता है. एंड केपीआईटी के रिजल्ट्स एक्चुअली शो दैट. मुझे नहीं लगता केपीआईटी के रिजल्ट्स में कहीं भी ऐसा स्लो डाउन या फिर कंपटीशन के पास से कुछ ऐसा दिख के आ रहा है. सिमिलर थिंग आप साइंट का देखो. सो साइंट ने भी सिमिलर इनके कार्बन एंड एनर्जी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन स्पेस में एक्विजिशन किया था. आई थिंक नॉर्डिक्स में कहीं किया था. आई डोंट रिमेम्बर एग्जैक्टली इन्होंने कहाँ किया था, but they did a something similar acquisition for a very small consulting company that does a consulting within the carbon capture and the energy transformation space. And if you see the kind of growth that this consultancy has had on its standalone basis, you will be absolutely blown away by that growth. तो जो कंपनीज ये सब कर पा रही हैं, साइंट हो गया, केपीआईटी हो गया, आई थिंक रिगार्डलेस ऑफ द कंपटीशन दे विल कीप ऑन रिपोर्टिंग गुड नंबर्स.
Right, Ameya. So Pranjal, you can quickly go next, and then Bhavin.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Prince. Hi, Ameya, sir. I also want to say hi, Kumar, Saurabh, sir. So, sir, I think you initially, you mostly answered my first question. It was just a general overview of the ER&D sector, for the next 2 to 3 years. And I also wanted to know, why KPIT is sort of it's a differentiated player in the sector where, it's growing 40-45%, whereas the sector, I mean, on an average is going 13 to 15%. Maybe science is also an exception this quarter. So, I mean, maybe you answered that, but the first question is general overview of the sector, ER&D sector for the next 2 to 3 years.
ये जो स्पेशलाइज्ड प्लेयर है प्रांजल, इन माय व्यू दे विल कंटिन्यू टू डू रियली वेल. एंड आई ट्वीटेड अबाउट दिस स्पेस सम टाइम बैक कि एटलीस्ट अगले 2-3 साल के लिए whoever is over diversified will actually see difficult to keep on posting sequentially or growth numbers. It's going to be a little difficult for them. Whoever is focused on doing these things that we just talked about, they will continue to deliver the growth. So जब ये डाइवर्सिफाइड सेक्टर की बात आती है तो उसमें लाइक्स ऑफ HCL टेक का ER&D स्पेस हो गया या आपका LTTS हो गया. बट ये जहाँ पे ओवर डाइवर्सिफिकेशन है वहां पे थोड़ा सा कंसर्न है. बिकॉज आई लाइक आई मेंशन राइट कि ER&D में दो चीजें बहुत मैटर करती हैं. एक आपका डिलीवरी मैच्योरिटी. डिलीवरी मैच्योरिटी का डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट किस चीज पे होता है? आपका ऑन साइट ऑफशोर मिक्स पे. तो द हायर द डिलीवरी मैच्योरिटी द बेटर इज योर ऑन साइट ऑफशोर मिक्स. दैट मीन्स आपको कम लोग ऑन साइट रखने पड़ते हैं टू डिलीवर द सेम वैल्यू टू द कस्टमर, राइट? So that is precisely why Tata ELXSI kept on posting 30% plus margin while someone like LTTS kept on struggling, to post anything even above 18%. So delivery maturity बहुत ज़्यादा मैटर करती है ये स्पेस में. Whoever is taking right steps will continue to deliver. That's why I think Cyient and KPIT are the two primary companies who, जिससे मुझे expectation है कि ये लोग अच्छा result post करेंगे. Second thing is access to the engineering talent is not as free flowing as it is for IT services, right? So and कंपटीशन जो है वो इंडिया में वो बहुत ट्रमेंडसली ग्रो कर रही है. इफ यू सी द कॉन कॉल ट्रांसक्रिप्ट ऑफ ईपैम लास्ट क्वार्टर, दे हैव जस्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट इंडिया. हम लोगों को इंडिया में क्या करना है, इंडिया में किस तरह से ग्रो करना है. कंपनीज लाइक जो बाकी लाइक प्रोडक्ट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एनर्जी यूटिलिटीज स्पेस में प्राइमरी इनोवेटर्स रही हैं. स्नाइडर हो गया, बॉश हो गया, या फिर आपका हिताची हो गया, राइट. ABB हो गया. So the ABB and Hitachi are part of the same group, but still they're two different companies. But the point is, these companies are also growing their engineering captive talent pool within India. So they are also focusing on India. So ये competition सिर्फ बाकी ER&D players से नहीं आ रही है, but traditional जो product companies है, manufacturing and engineering companies है, उनसे भी आ रही है. तो सोर्सिंग एंड इंजीनियरिंग टैलेंट जो उतना फ्री फ्लोइंग नहीं है आईटी के जैसा, एक तो पहला वो चैलेंज है. उसके बाद से ये सारी कंपनीज स्लोली अपना बेस इंडिया की तरफ फोकस कर रही है. डेल्टा एनर्जी सिस्टम्स आल्सो व्हिच आई टॉक्ड अबाउट, दे आर स्पेशलाइज्ड प्लेयर विद इन द पावर सेक्टर एंड द डेटा सेंटर. एज डेटा सेंटर में स्पेशली इन लोगों के काफी डिस्टिंग्विश्ड सर्विसेज है. ऑल्सो द ईवी चार्जिंग इंफ्रा, ये स्पेस में ये लोग काफी एक्टिव है. ताइवान बेस्ड कंपनी है ऑल दो, बट इन लोगों का अगर आप इंडिया में ग्रोथ देखोगे पिछले 2 साल में, तो वो फिनोमिनल ग्रोथ है. दे आर ग्रोइंग देयर फुटप्रिंट वेरी सिग्निफिकेंटली. सो ये एक ट्रेंड बहुत कंसिस्टेंटली विजिबल है कि जो प्राइमरी प्रोडक्ट इनोवेटर्स हैं, दे आर ऑल्सो ग्रोइंग देयर फुटप्रिंट्स विद इन इंडिया. And like I said, the access to engineering talent is as not free flowing as it is for the IT services. So वो एक blocker हो जाता है. And then ये बाकी की जो कंपनीज हमने बात की, हिताची, ABB, स्नाइडर, बॉश, ये लोग प्राइमरीली यहीं पे बेस्ड हैं. तो ये उनको यहाँ का टैलेंट का एक्सेस और यहाँ के मार्केट का एक्सेस तो बहुत इजीली मिल जाता है. बट अ कंपनी लाइक KPIT एंड Cyient जो इंडिया बेस्ड है, if they are doing all this kind of right acquisition and if they are allowing these acquired companies to operate independently, but in alignment with the goal that all these companies have on their own, they will keep on growing. ये मेरा broad perspective है. But again, I'll give an opportunity to someone else to come in and chip in. I mean, whatever we have been talking, I think Saurabh bhai is also still there. He has also done a marathon session on IT and ER&D space. So it would be very interesting to hear his thoughts as well.
Saurabh bhai, do you wanna add something to it?
Can I just say one thing, Prince?
Yep.
Yeah,
please.
I actually wanted to thank both of you. So I'm a commerce background, and I have no knowledge of the IT sector. So I recently only started tracking the ER&D space from November last year, and I saw the SOIC series where Ameya sir you presented, and even Kumar Saurabh sir's IT sessions. There's a webinar on IT that sir has done. So I actually saw both of those, and after that, my understanding has been increasing. I've been tracking the results for every company, so that has actually helped me a lot. Secondly, the second question is a little company specific. So I've been tracking these two companies, Access Gates and Onward Technology. So, sir, Access Gates, building on the point that you were saying, how sometimes acquisitions go mostly go rightly for ER&D companies. So I just wanted to know your views on Access Gates acquisition of Epcogen and Mistral. I mean, if you just look at the business on pure number wise, I mean, numbers don't look that great, but most probably the earnings are depressed, and we'll see the real juice out of those acquisitions 2-3 years out. So first is Access Gates, and so second is Onward. I just wanted to know that I mean the company has gone through a beautiful transformation in the last two and a half years, and if you just see there's a balance sheet transformation as well, and they're trying to change the client mix as well. So in case of Onward, do you think it's just a pure execution thing now? We have to see how they execute and how they scale up those top 10 clients. So I just wanted to understand on both.
Yeah. Understood. So पहले अगर onward के बारे में if I answer first about onward, see onward पिछले 1 साल भर में खुद का transformation के through भी गया है. So they had a lot of domestic focused contracts which they started giving away. Tata Motor का काफी बड़ा volume का contract था that they gave away. And then onward used to be primarily mechanical driven ER&D company, जो उन्होंने वो आउटलुक कंप्लीटली चेंज करके उन्होंने वो पूरा डिजिटल कर दिया, राइट. सो ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम they transformed their entire operations. उन्होंने उनका इंडस्ट्री फोकस चेंज किया. उन्होंने प्रोडक्ट सेगमेंट जहाँ पे वो प्राइमरीली एक्टिव थे उन्होंने वो सारा चेंज कर दिया. सो इफ यू टेक ऑल दिस थिंग्स इनटू कंसिडरेशन, it has done very well over let's say last year or so. But again, now where it is coming is the execution, as you correctly said. They have some good, what would I say, they have POs from some of the very prominent names here within the Europe. But सिर्फ PO मिलने से कुछ नहीं होता है, right? So आपके लिए सेल्स तभी होगा जब आप इनवॉइस कर रहे हो कस्टमर को. सो इनके पास में काफी अच्छे POs थे जिसके बारे में जिगर ने बात किया था ऑन कॉन कॉल्स लाइक 2-3 quarters ago. बट टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, वो एग्जीक्यूशन में एक जो अपटिक आना चाहिए वो अभी तक नहीं आया है. दैट इज द फैक्ट. Second thing that has changed is there was a stake sale from promoter to some of the PE funds, and then they came in and I think they also sold in the market. So street
Yes.
didn't like that as well, right? So ये 2-3 reasons हैं जिसके वजह से kind of उसको थोड़ा सा hamper कर दिया. मतलब it grew decently, बट उसमें जो भी बीटिंग आया है स्टॉक प्राइस में वो प्राइमरीली ये 2 रीजन के वजह से आया है. बट दे आर ओपनिंग ऑफिसेस इन US, इन कनाडा, इंडिया का भी तो ऑलरेडी हम लोगों ने बात कर दिया. बट लाइक आई सेड, क्रैकिंग यूरोपियन मार्केट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट. Whoever has cracked in European market is either company like Infosys who has a strong presence. I mean IT कंपनी के बारे में बात करूं, या फिर ईपैम हो गया, या फिर KPIT, या फिर साइंट हो गया, जो इस तरह से कर रहे हैं. आई थिंक दिस इज प्रिसाइजली वेयर दिस एप्कोजन एक्विजिशन. एप्कोजन तो प्राइमरीली आपका आई थिंक इंजीनियरिंग सर्विसेज कंपनी है प्राइमरीली. रिगार्डलेस, आई मीन गैस रिफाइनरीज, पेट्रोकेमिकल एंड पावर में काम करता है, राइट?
Yes, sir.
So correct. So I think that was one of the again correct steps within the ER&D space. आप अगर काम कर रहे हो तो काफी अच्छा है. बट ऑनवर्ड के केस में ये थोड़ा सा प्रॉब्लमेटिक चीज चल रही है. दे आर टू स्मॉल टू डू एन एक्विजिशन बिकॉज इनको काफी सारी जगह पे ऑलरेडी एक्सपेंसेस करने हैं. दे हैव टू सर्विस द एग्जिस्टिंग POs, दे हैव टू इंश्योर दैट उनका जो भी पॉकेट शेयर है वो ग्रो करे. काफी बड़ा वर्कफोर्स इनका ऑनलाइन आया है अभी. तो दे ऑनवर्ड वाज नोन, वो तो बहुत ज्यादा बल्क में हायरिंग नहीं करते थे, but they did lot of hiring in last couple of quarters. I think
Yes, sir.
over
Yes, sir.
200 odd people are coming in. So वो एक we also have to see how that is translating into the revenue. But I'm optimistic over let's say next year or so, maybe they'll do good. But I'll also say this, Axis Carriage, अगर आप सिर्फ ऑनवर्ड के साथ कंपेयर कर रहे हो तो इनका कैपेबिलिटी थोड़ा सा ज्यादा मैच्योर है एक्सिस कैरिज का
Yeah, sir. I
compared to
think that is
Onward.
also sort of visible in their margins, because I think Onward is at a place where Axis Kids was like probably 3-4 years back in terms
Yeah.
of margins. So
Yeah.
I mean, interesting because you keep. So I've listened to you and like talk about the sector. So that was the only concern, because I mean it's no Axis Kids is like a 2,000 crore company, and they've already done 2 acquisitions. They already have like 5-6 verticals. So I mean, it was a little difficult for me to understand how will they scale up everything together.
Right.
Thanks, Ranjan.
Thank you, sir.
Saurabh is here. Maybe he has something to add.
Yeah, am I audible? Can I speak now?
Yeah, you are Saurabh.
Yeah. So just one point I will add on the ER&D, how you should look at next 2-3 years. My understanding is there are three kinds of companies in ER&D. I think Ameya bhai said one is diversified. Then there are two more. One is which is very, very sector focused. And one, though, which is sector focused, they're in some kind of disruption cycle, like let's say, electric vehicles and all. So we need to be little cautious on the second and third, especially when companies are going through the high growth cycle, especially those which are more in a sector which is going through a growth cycle after a long time. Like if you take aerospace or you take a defense, my sense is the growth might be very volatile, the growth might be very high, but the moment that concentrated sector cycle tops out, the same company might look very bad at it, might be looking very bad, 3-4 years down the line. So the way I would like to do it is I would like to look at the sector concentration of these companies and I would like to track how the sector growth rate of these companies are doing. And the moment I look the sector growth rate slowing down, I will have my apprehension over these companies. The other thing is, if we look at the resource utilization of some of these companies, at least in my 10 years, I never heard of utilization of 88 and 90% kind of utilization. 80% was the peak. So those kind of times might come once in 10 years. So those are some of the things which we have to look at these companies. It may not come again. So that is how I would like to bucket the company in each of these three buckets where the company lies, and this is how I would like to track.
Right, Saurabh. Yeah, Bhavin.
थैंक यू वेरी मच। मुझे ये पूछना है कि आईओटी कंपनी का फ्यूचर प्रोस्पेक्टस कैसा है इंडियन मार्केट में? थैंक यू।
सर prospect तो अच्छा ही है because IoT is a technology, right? So it's not a बट IoT में जैसे जैसे आपका बिल्डिंग मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम्स हो गया या फिर आपका EVs या फिर स्मार्ट कार्स हो गया, ये सारी चीजों में आपका IoT इन्वॉल्व होता है। आपका स्मार्ट सिटीज हो गया या फिर आपके स्मार्ट पाइपलाइंस, स्मार्ट ग्रिड, एनीथिंग स्मार्ट बेसिकली जहाँ पे आपके सेंसर्स लगेंगे एंड दैट सेंसर्स नीड अ प्लेटफॉर्म टू रिले द डेटा बैक। you have an IoT space that is required. किसी केस में there is a high bandwidth required. For example, if you have an autonomous vehicle, the access to the bandwidth is significantly higher compared to something, let's say, called as a smart meter, which operates on a narrow band, right? So narrow band IoT हो गया, आपका wide band IoT हो गया. So all these things, मतलब जैसे ओवरऑल आपका इंडस्ट्री ट्रांसफॉर्म होता है, आपका ये सारा एंसिलरी चीजें भी ट्रांसफॉर्म डेफिनेटली होती हैं। बट ऐसा है सर कि ऑनेस्टली आईओटी स्पेस में ऐसा कोई स्पेशलाइज्ड नहीं है बात जिसकी वजह से किसी का बहुत ही सिग्निफिकेंटली हाई ग्रोथ अपने को दिखेगा। ऑलमोस्ट एवरीबडी हैज समथिंग और अदर थिंग टू ऑफर विद इन दी आईओटी। आईओटी में इम्पोर्टेंस ये आता है कि आपके पास में जो डेटा आ रहा है, जो अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड डेटा आ रहा है, अगर आपका वो नैरो बैंड का ऑफरिंग है फॉर एग्जांपल, तो काफी चिल होता है, आपका उतना ज्यादा कुछ रश नहीं होता है वो डेटा को आपको मॉडल करके स्ट्रक्चर करके वापस उसमें से कुछ एनालिटिक्स बिल्ड करना। एंड व्हेन इट कम्स टू द एनालिटिक्स एंड ऑल दैट, I will not get into details because Saurabh is there and he has been a data scientist for a long period of time. So he can throw some light on that side of the IoT. But as a इंडस्ट्री आपका जैसे जैसे डिजिटाइज होना शुरू हो जाता है, वैसे वैसे आईओटी इज वन ऑफ द एसोसिएटेड कंपनी सेक्टर्स जो ग्रो करेगा ही करेगा। बट इज आईओटी समथिंग जहाँ पे आप स्पेसिफिकली इन्वेस्ट करना चाहोगे? आई डोंट थिंक दैट यू शुड डू।
लाइक CWD लिमिटेड, उन्होंने लास्ट 6 मंथ्स का रिजल्ट्स बहुत ही अच्छा पोस्ट किया है लास्ट 2 ईयर के कंपैरिजन में।
ओके, आई डोंट ट्रैक द कंपनी
Hello.
सर, सो
ओके,
Hello.
नो प्रॉब्लम।
So
यस सर।
just one thing I will add. In IoT, if we look, there will be three kinds of companies. One will be hardware. And again, as Ameya bhai said, getting a pure play company in IoT might be very difficult. But if we have to look IoT from a business model perspective, there will be three kinds of companies: hardware company, services company, platform company. The lowest margin business, in my view, will be the hardware business. Then you have the services business. So like, I think one of the most successful use cases of IoT and sensor I can think is predictive maintenance is one of the most successful use cases. So there could be companies which might be, focused on the analytics side, and for them this might be, one of the best use cases. And then the third is platform, where you have used sensors and you have tried to build a scalable platform, and then you are selling that IoT based platform to your clients. I don't know if in India somebody has built a platform or not, but that is what is going to be the higher margin business. So if I have to analyze a company on the capability of IoT, first I will try to analyze out of these three verticals or these three business models, where are they, and then कहाँ पे उनका business और वो क्या कर रहे हैं, and then accordingly I will look at the business. And I have also not heard about this company, so I can't comment more.
Hello. Learner, learner GJ, yeah.
Yeah. Learner GJ, nothing but Nitin. So, actually, I would like to know from Ameya or Saurabh, which are the, not focused technologies like, automotive semiconductor or automotive SDV. So these are the, currently booming technologies, but which can be, next booming technologies, but currently not focused. So that is one to just to understand and to explore these new technologies globally. So that is one part. And second is which can be potential next KPIT in Indian market, uh, in line with automotive or beyond automotive. Yeah, so these two questions. Yeah.
The second question का तो answer मैं नहीं दे पाऊंगा. I don't know what will be the next KPIT. I think KPIT itself is good enough to grow its pace given the kind of how it has differentiated itself from the peers. But coming to the first, I think ऐसा नहीं है कि टेक्नोलॉजी स्पेस में देखो आजकल ऐसा कोई हिडन नहीं रहता है कि कहाँ पे कौन सा टेक्नोलॉजी है जहाँ पे पोटेंशियल बहुत है और उसके बारे में डिस्कस नहीं किया जा रहा है. बट प्रोबेबली अगर बात करनी ही है तो आई विल टॉक अबाउट एडिटिव मैन्युफैक्चरिंग. And I talked about it quite some time ago. So ये एक स्पेस है जहाँ पे आई हैव माय आईज ऑन, बट इसमें जो काफी हाईली स्पेशलाइज्ड कंपनीज है वो काफी स्टिल अभी भी अनलिस्टेड स्पेस में ही है. लिस्टेड स्पेस में कुछ कंपनीज के पास में इसका कैपेबिलिटी है. फॉर एग्जांपल साइंट के पास, साइंट डीएलएम जो सेपरेट आउट हुआ, डिजाइन लेड मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, दे हैव अ कैपेबिलिटी. Avalon had some capability, but they got into project execution troubles, and उसके बाद से they are just trying to come out of that mess. So I don't think उनका focus right now additive manufacturing के ऊपर होगा. But काफी सारी जो value added products manufacture करती हैं इस space में, they are still not in the listed space as such. Cyan DLM के पास में थोड़ा सा कुछ capabilities है, and they basically shipped, I think, कुछ pilot set of tooling components. उन्होंने कुछ उनके customers को deliver किए थे. Then they manufactured that based on the additive manufacturing just within the 10 days. So kind of 40% savings that they offer to the customer on the overall material consumption and the lead time and so on. And I think उसके basis पे they had gotten a follow-up order of additional 500 parts, but उसके बाद से as such कोई उसके ऊपर update नहीं है. So I think design-led manufacturing and the additive manufacturing is one of the space, but मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये जो space है ये भी similar है. इसमें भी आपको specific industries and specific geographies के ऊपर आपका dependence है. और एडिटिव मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की आप लोग अगर हम बात करें ना तो इस चीज में यूरोप में जो कंपनीज करंटली ऑपरेट करती हैं वो वैल्यू चेन में कहीं हायर आती है हमारे से. सो बट दिस इज वन स्पेस व्हिच आई ट्रैक फॉर एकेडमिक पर्पस. Other than that, Saurabh, are you tracking anything specifically within the tech?
No, I mean nothing new, but my understanding is we all talk of KPIT and all, but I mean we have to look what creates extraordinary returns in companies, and it happens because we buy some of these non-linear operating leverage kind of business models at a very cheap valuation, and when the market appreciates it, we get a return which is much higher than the EPS growth rate. The question is where there is a possibility of these kind of non-linear returns and what to study. So for sure, I believe rather than in pure play services, when we look at businesses which are more non-linear, like platform-based businesses, software-based businesses, these are the businesses where there is a probability. Like if I can talk of Newgen, it's not like Newgen was a business which came out in 2021 and 22. That business got listed in 2018 and people knew this business since then. But because you could get the same business at 16, 17 times earning, the same software business, it has become a 4-5 bagger. So the question is today, do we have these kind of platform businesses, these kind of services, software businesses available at a valuation from where if the operating leverage plays out, is there a scope of making disproportionate money? If I can think of such companies, few companies, and again, nothing is a recommendation. I'm just talking from, the framework perspective. So I see just India Mart the kind of valuation get, and just dial the kind of valuation gets. There's a huge difference, and there's a reason for that difference, because one company is sitting on 4,000, almost 5,000 crore of cash on 8,000 crore market cap, and maybe because promoters don't know what to do with this cash, market is not giving this valuation. But when you look at the business model, it's a non-linear business model, and that is why when you'll see the numbers 4 or 5 quarters down the line, the EBITDA margin has grown from almost 17% to 26%. So this is how we have to look at the businesses, and then we have to look at the valuation, and then see, is this a non-linear business? Now platform is something which was very popular 2 years back, and right now also when we talk of companies like IndiaMart, it is popular. But there is a company which is not popular, where valuations might be in favor because of reasons. So this is how we have to look at businesses, rather than trying to find the buzzword based business, because पैसा तो ऐसे ही बनता है. This is my understanding of, you need to be in the right segment at the right valuation. So like, this was just for example, but this is how we have to look at businesses, that what could deliver a KPIT type of earning.
All right, so Anupam, you are next in line, and then Rajneesh. Yeah, Anupam. Anupam, you are still on mute. Okay,
Yeah,
Rajneesh,
sorry.
you can go.
Yeah.
Okay. Anupam is there. Yeah, go
Thanks
ahead.
for the opportunity. What I wanted to understand was how does this SAP and Oracle companies, so those that offer the like the providers, and then they implement these solutions in enterprises like custom made solutions. So what are the margins? Because in SAP, from what I can understand is, I just want to correct my understanding if I'm wrong. What they don't earn much by selling the product. They earn through customizing it. So what is the scope and what is the anti barrier for them or anything like
यार ऐसा नहीं है SAP Oracle जो है especially जो enterprise software वाला space है that itself has gone through a tremendous transformation over a period of time, right? So they have also transitioned from perpetual licensing to, let's say, service-based consumption-based licensing. They have launched their own industry cloud solutions, and they also help their customers build private clouds based on the solution offerings that they have. So ऐसा नहीं है कि इन लोगों का बहुत ज्यादा कुछ बिजनेस नहीं आता है. Customization is just one of the pockets of the entire value chain, because that's how the industry has been since quite a long period of time. If you go back uh, probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, SAP and Oracles, they had their own teams who would go and customize. In fact, छोटे product space में अभी भी यही होता है, that the same company sells the license for a couple of $1 million, based on where it operates, of course. But enterprise space में typically आप अगर core business processes में काम कर रहे हो, जिसमें आपका FI logistics or warehousing or manufacturing processes को integration है, तो typically आपका अगर कोई product है तो the product licensing easily sells for $1 million or something of that sort. And typically you also add another $1 million for customization, and then there is an AMC revenue that starts flowing in. So ये जो छोटी product companies होती है, they still have these three pockets. But over a period of time, SAP understood, and rather Oracle also operates on a similar model. They understood that we cannot really go on implementing because there are other companies who can do that independently. Let us focus primarily on the product innovation, because they have to keep on bringing newer versions of the product. They are keep on building newer additional capabilities. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि इन लोगों का बिजनेस अच्छा नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं होता तो वो कस्टमाइजिंग कभी छोड़ते ही नहीं, राइट? सो उनका प्रोडक्ट सेल्स, लाइसेंस सेल्स का रेवेन्यू सिग्निफिकेंटली हाई. इनके मार्जिन जो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन पार्टनर होता है उनसे प्रोबेबली दुगना दुगना तो मिनिमम होगा, राइट? सो that is how it operates, and what the way it helps is it kind of helps the overall ecosystem, right? um, that is when you have these partner ecosystem that comes into picture. Like people say, I am a platinum partner with SAP, I'm a platinum partner with Oracle. How exactly does that help to the end customer? So if I am a customer and I'm looking to adopt Oracle or SAP, I go to the platinum partner. Platinum partner is able to offer me discounts because that company is a platinum partner with SAP. अगर मैं SAP के पास सीधे से जाऊं तो SAP will say this is your licensing fee. But if I go through a platinum partner, what happens is that partner sources a lead, passes on the licensing revenue to SAP, takes care of the implementation and the AMC. So in kind of helps the overall ecosystem, or जो primary product OEM software providers हैं, they don't really have to keep their sales channel going on uh, in every possible small pocket of the industry, right? It's a synergistic ecosystem where the implementation partners also help SAP, because कई spaces में ऐसा होता है काफी सारे प्रोडक्ट फीचर्स जो होते हैं वो OEM सॉफ्टवेयर प्रोवाइडर्स नहीं इमेजिन कर पाते, बिकॉज दे आर नॉट डायरेक्टली डे इन डे आउट कस्टमर के साथ में वो एंगेज नहीं हो रहे हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल होते हैं, बट जो जितना कोई कस्टमाइजेशन कर रहा है किसी स्पेस में, उन लोगों को पता होता है कि यार BFSI है तो ये कस्टम फीचर चाहिए ही चाहिए, और ये ओरेकल या SAP नहीं प्रोवाइड करता है, या फिर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है तो ये फीचर चाहिए ही चाहिए। सो दैट इज हाउ दीज implementation partners, they develop solutions on top of SAPs and Oracles, and then they create an IP out of it. They get those IPs kind of certified from SAP, and then they start selling these IPs to the customer. And in some cases ऐसा भी होता है, ऐसे भी cases हैं हमारे यहाँ पे कि these OEMs, they have approached these implementation partners and asked them to co-build a product, because they have implemented so many projects within a certain space. They understand कि कौन से features primarily होने ही चाहिए, so they also kind of participate in the product development life cycle and the journey. So it's all overall ecosystem है, हर किसी का अपना margin profile है, and कोई एक दूसरे का revenue, to be very honest, cannibalize नहीं करता है until certain level. But SAPs and Oracles, they also have their own independent SaaS-based offering, where you don't really need an intermediate, how would I say, customizing or implementation partner. If you know that this service is enough for me, this industry solution out of the box as a standard, I am more than happy to use. And I have, let's say, for example, captive talent base, and I can use that captive talent pool to customize whatever I have. I really don't need an implementation partner in that case, right? So ये भी business model काम करता है. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Just one follow-up. So from a partner perspective, मतलब यही है ना, मतलब राइट यही है ना कि और SAP और Oracle का पहले वो बेचेगा, and he is earning mostly not on that software as a partner, और वो अर्न कर रहा है तो 1-2% की मार्जिन होगी, बट कस्टमाइजेशन और O&M जो उसका मिलेगा, उसको जो ईयरली उसको मिलेगा AMC चार्जेस में, उससे उसका रेवेन्यू आ रहा है मेजरली।
Majorly, yes, but there are certain kickbacks from the sales that you do, वो भी part होता है. But major revenue is always from the implementation and the maintenance. Yes.
अच्छा, और इसी में मुझे मतलब लेट्स से इफ आई एम द कस्टमर एंड इफ आई वांट टू चेंज इट आफ्टर 3 years, मतलब मेरे लिए क्या कुछ ऐसे बैरियर होंगे कि आई कैन नॉट गो टू दिस पार्टनर और दैट पार्टनर पर से, अगर प्राइसिंग में जो कोई बेटर ऑफर करता है तो?
You can, but problem कहाँ पे आता है कि आप एक सिंगल वेंडर के पास में ज्यादा डिपेंडेंट हो जाते हो. So that's why you see जो बड़ी बड़ी कंपनीज होती है, they never have one vendor implementing entire SAP or entire Oracle landscape for you. आपका फाइनेंस किसी के पास होगा, आपका HR किसी के पास होगा, आपका सेल्स किसी के पास होगा, आपका प्राइसिंग किसी और के पास होगा, लॉजिस्टिक कोई और इम्प्लीमेंट कर रहा होगा, आपका जो चेंज मैनेजमेंट है वो कोई और इम्प्लीमेंट कर रहा होगा, टेस्टिंग के लिए कोई और होगा. बेसिकली दीज बिग कस्टमर्स दे अवॉइड सिंगल पॉइंट ऑफ फेलियर्स, बिकॉज इस वजह से हो ये जाता है, दीज कंपनीज गेट सो कंफर्टेबल. फिर वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कंपनीज है ना, जो थोड़ी सी एग्रेसिव हो जाती हैं, सी यू डोंट हैव एनी अल्टरनेटिव अदर देन दस, हम ही है, हमको ही सब कुछ पता है आपके यहाँ पे क्या कस्टमाइज किया हुआ है, कैसा किया हुआ है, एंड देन इट गेट्स इनटू वेरी रॉन्ग साइड, राइट? सो
Yes.
यूजुअली कंपनीज दे ट्राई टू अवॉइड दिस, एंड एटलीस्ट 2 से 3 वेंडर्स हर कोई लेके चलता ही है एट एनी पॉइंट इन टाइम.
Got it. ठीक है.
Thanks,
I
Anupam.
just have one more question,
Rajni-
Amma. Any
Yeah, Anupam, please wait, please wait. There are many in the queue. You can come again if it's not connected here. Okay, Rajneesh, you can go next.
हेलो सौरभ भाई, मेरा आपसे सवाल है, जैसे आपने न्यूजन का बहुत अच्छा वो किया था एनालिसिस, उसके कंपैरिजन में सिमिलर प्रोडक्ट जो डाटामेटिक्स दे रहा है अभी, तो उस पे आप क्या कहेंगे? और सेकंड है एक्सिलिया वर्सेस रेडकिन.
So, hi Rajesh bhai, hope you are doing good. So, many data matrix I have not studied, so it will be very difficult for me to make any comment given I have not studied data matrix. But coming to rate gain versus Axelia, see, Axelia is a company which has been there for last 10 years. And if you look at the growth rate of the company itself, it's quite evident looking at the growth rate that it's not a high growth rate company. And even though you go and study the business model and aviation, if you look at last 2 years, aviation is having one of the best growths. I mean, in one decade. So even in one of the best decadal growth rate, if the company is not doing that great, that means it is done with its penetration or whatever are the ways and levers to penetrate and get the revenue. They say that they have a transaction based revenue and all, but all said and done, it's not doing that great versus a rate gain which is growing at 30-40%. So sometimes the numbers they speak for itself. Also, RateGain is another company which I am tracking, I think, for more than 1.5 years or 2 years. And it took me almost 8 to 10 months to convince myself, given it was an IPO company and new company, that this company is special. In fact, my first blog or video on leadership, I wrote about the RateGain promoter. So, the कौन सा बिजनेस अच्छा करेगा उसका न्यूएंसेस कॉमन रहता है. You need growth. You need and in disruptive industries, you need a promoter who has hunger for growth, hunger for transformation. You need a promoter with a very good capital allocation skill. If you go and read the AGM transcript of Rate Gain, which came last year, the promoter said that we like to buy certain businesses, but we like only when the valuation is right and we are getting at the right terms and condition. And the company which he wanted to buy at one point of time available at 10 times price to sales, he ended up buying that company at 0.9 times price to sales. I'm talking about the last acquisition which they have done. And then even if you look at their history before listing, the three acquisitions they did, they never did more than two price to sales. So that says a lot about the capital allocation skill. And the business in terms of growth is much more diversified. I mean, even it's in hospitality and all. You have hotel and different kinds of segments. So I would consider any day I would consider rate gain. I mean, in my personal experience, having studied Axelia somewhere in 17, 18, I was closely tracking it. And rate gain, I would any day rate gain at a higher level. But then, of course, valuations are the concern. I may not be a buyer at these kind of valuation, but I think he's a promoter to look at. I mean, when you look at those kind of leadership traits, to grow the business, to drive the business, to generate new business lines, to manage the disruption, to respect capital allocation, he ticks a lot of boxes. That is how I'd like to, differentiate these two companies.
और दो कंपनी जैसे सिंसेस टेक ने अभी अलीग्रो को टेक ओवर किया था, जो उसके अभी रेवेन्यू में अभी तक शायद रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं करता है. और सेकंड एक कंपनी है इस्मो, जो एक वर्चुअल जो आपका जो गाड़ियों का शोरूम है उस पे काम करती है. तो वो बिजनेस कैसे ग्रो कर सकता है?
So again, each of these companies I have looked at it, but IT is one sector where I always remain double cautious. And even though some of the things I let it go, I don't crib about it. The reason being, every time in IT when there is a new buzzword, you get a lot of dubious companies who will try to drive the market cap on those kind of buzzwords. So I don't have any comments, but if I don't have a proper understanding and validation of a business model which looks very interesting because it is new gen, but I'm not able to understand, usually I stay away. So that is how I would like to put Ismo in that bucket as my lack of understanding of the business model. Since this, I think, as I said in the beginning, geospatial analytics from an opportunity perspective, it's a very interesting area to look at. And we do have few companies in India. So one needs to do the whole detailed analysis. But from a market opportunity perspective, I think geospatial analytics is one of the places to study.
Okay. Okay.
Prince,
Thank you,
can I
sir. Ananya.
intervene a second
Yes, Sandeep.
here? So I see some interesting listeners in this space purely because the kind of content Ameya and Saurabh is probably speaking, and I see a name called Allinson and then Jerry, and they look like someone who have quite a bit of tech experience coming from China, so we have kind of international audience. So if they want to come up as a speaker and want to add anything, Ellen, I noticed that is even being followed by CJ of Balance. So I'm not even sure, like, if they are comfortable coming up as a speaker. If they can, probably it will be a good, interesting exchange also. But yeah, back to agenda, Prince.
Also,
Thanks.
Nikhil sir is
So,
also there. If he's come open to speak, I'm more than happy to hear his thought also.
Thanks so much.
surely, I mean, one or two speakers more
Sure,
before I
sure.
come to Nikhil. So, yeah. So Ananya and then Raksha and then we have one two more. Yeah. Yeah, Ananya.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wanted your view on Tanla and how this industry is going to expand in the future. Yeah, that's all from my side. Hello.
So Saurabh, Ameya got dropped. Do you have any view till the time Ameya joins?
No, Prince, I have not studied the company, so it won't be wise of me to make any comment.
So Raksha, over to you.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity again. Just one very quick one. Any thoughts on Mastech? Probably a different topic, but within the IT industry, any thoughts on Mastech? Open to ideas or thoughts.
Hello, am I audible, Prince? Sorry, I got dropped off.
Yeah, yeah, Ameya, you were. So the previous question was on the space in which Tanla Platforms is in. So any thoughts because you got dropped?
यार देखो ऐसा है एज एन इंडस्ट्री टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट राउट मोबाइल ने बीच में कुछ करने का ट्राई किया था एंड बिजनेस इज वेरी फ्लूइड इंडस्ट्री एज वेल इज वेरी फ्लूइड एंड इफ यू सी द इंडस्ट्री एंड ये प्राइमरीली आपके आईएलडी बिजनेस के ऊपर काफी रिलाई करता है टू अर्न द मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द मार्जिन्स राइट so international originated and domestically terminating messages, especially. So people and these companies primarily try to drive margins from that business. Uh, but to be very honest with you, I find this entire space a little too complicated to keep a track of because ये बिजनेस में ना कोई लॉयल्टी नहीं है. कभी कोई कस्टमर जैसे एसबीआई पहले I don't know किस कंपनी के पास था, but they very swiftly they changed to Airtel because Airtel also had a similar offering. So to be very honest with you, मुझे इसमें ट्रैक करने का इंटरेस्ट इस वजह से नहीं है बिकॉज काफी सारे मूविंग पार्ट्स हैं इंडस्ट्री में एंड सीपास एज अ प्लेटफॉर्म इज समथिंग जो अभी उतना ज्यादा यूनिक नहीं रहा है. एयरटेल हैज अ कैपेबिलिटी, टाटा कम्युनिकेशंस हैज pretty decent capabilities. तनला ऑल्सो उसके ऊपर काफी बात किया जाता है फ्रॉम द कॉर्पोरेट गवर्नेंस पर्सपेक्टिव. रूट मोबाइल ने भी अभी काफी सारे कॉर्पोरेट चेंजेस करके रख दिए हैं. सो as an industry, I find just too many moving parts to it, and I find it very hectic to keep a track of all these things. So, not very keen, from tracking perspective as such.
Right. And if you heard the question from Raksha, or maybe she can repeat it for you.
Yeah, thanks. It was more to understand thoughts on Mastech.
See, like I said, I've been very vocal on Mustang since quite a long time. Mustang is one classic use case. The company has been around for quite a long time. Very good operating history and relationship with Oracle. So there, when it comes, and also very distinguished within the geographies like UK and some parts of Europe, right? So that is why their dependency on both things. Understanding that is a key here. So first of all, Oracle has to keep on innovating new products. That is one. And second thing is how the overall UK as an economy is doing. So if you're tracking UK economy as a whole, you would understand that within UK, majority of these IT and technology spends that primarily comes from the public sector entities, right? जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल उनका वाटर डिपार्टमेंट हो गया, एनएचएस हो गया, या फिर उनका बाकी जो भी पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटिटीज है, गवर्नमेंट एंटिटीज है, they are the primary, they create a primary spend on the IT sector. Universities हो गई उन लोगों की काफी सारी, and these entities, they historically they have kind of an inkling towards adopting an Oracle solution. But if you're tracking this space very closely, you would see a lot of universities and a lot of counties, they are now slowly starting to, phase out their Oracle-based solution and trying to adopt something completely fresh, completely new. There are countless troubles that are going on. Budget overspends हो चुके हैं. University में टीचर्स एंड लेक्चरर्स के स्पेंड्स नहीं मैनेज हो पा रहे हैं. सो ये मैं एक आपको यूके में और ओरेकल के कंटेक्स्ट में एक थोड़ी इंफॉर्मेशन दे रहा हूँ. सो दैट इज व्हाई जो हेडविंड्स हैं वहां पे वो तो कंटिन्यूअसली बनी रहेंगी. What Mustech could probably have done little better is, they could have diversified with an offering coming from, let's say, Snow or SAP. But we are all aware that probably Mustech is just too afraid that Oracle will feel bad if they go to someone else. But yeah, जो यूके का प्राइमरी टेक स्पेंड करने वाला एंटिटी है वो गवर्नमेंट है, एंड दे आर काइंड ऑफ स्लोली फॉलिंग आउट ऑफ ओरेकल. How
Yeah.
that will translate over a long period of time, I don't know. Over a short period, probably उतना impact नहीं होगा because there are ongoing engagements, and Mustech ने ऐसा कुछ issue नहीं किया है. Mustech has never been named in any of such, project failures. So there is still a silver lining to the scheme of things. But यहाँ पे जो product scouting होता है ये companies खुद करती है, and then Mustech kind of comes into picture, right? So I will be watching this space. I keep on tracking. There is a website called as the Register. You
Okay.
can go there and you can track this space. They post about counties, universities, and their water departments, energy departments, and who is overspending, कौन से projects failures की तरफ जा रहे हैं, कौन सा implementation partner था और कौन product platform partner था. They post all these kind of details very frequently. So if you are keen to track, you can go to the website and kind of create a notification and or subscribe to them, and then just keep a tab on how it is happening. So that probably kind of is a lead indicator for you.
Thanks. And I think the other point is about the small players. There are quite a few. If you see, BJSS is there or Scrum Connect is there. There are quite a few of these small players. And BJSS has been there for some time, but some of these players have just emerged as a part of either mergers with some companies like 6.6 taken over by Accenture and all that, right? But there are quite a few they are making good inroads into the public sector within UK. That's what I feel, and that's where, again, this is my view and based on what I have studied, but I'm very I would say novice in terms of trying to understand companies and track them on that basis, in comparison to the gurus that we've got on this forum here.
No, your observation is absolutely spot on. So if you look, lot of municipalities also they were awarding contracts to a company called as Unit 4. You must have heard about Unit 4. So
Yeah.
ऐसा नहीं है कि Oracle से आके SAP के पास आ रहे हैं, but they are kind of slowly moving towards companies who are natively digital, जो
Yeah.
primarily SaaS based operate करते. You don't have to get into on-prem perpetual licensing kind of a scenario. So that's where these companies like Unit 4, which are cloud native companies, are making inroads. I completely agree with you on that point.
Okay. Thank you, Ameya.
Nikhil, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Prince. Uh, so, Amaya, I think we have had a wonderful discussion so far on IT services, ER&D, and a bunch of other things. I was thinking, just if we were to expand the discussion a little bit more towards, which is more emerging today, Gen AI, and would love to hear your thoughts on things like high-end computing and how it is coming up, and maybe a little bit on data centers as well, maybe with examples of companies like NetWeb, because I think those are, that's again an area that I think a lot of us are still learning about. And I know you you have a keen interest there as well. So I thought maybe let me bring that up, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, given your own professional experience within the tech, I would, honestly be a little nervous to speak in front of you. But just purely from a discussion perspective, and please correct me if I go wrong somewhere. So more than happy to kind of speak on that. The way I see it is, it's the entire Gen AI thing that's kind of sliced into, let's say, three layers. First is the application layer, and the application layer is where basically the applications that consume the compute and consume the underlying, let's say, large language models, which can be either open LLMs or the customized or retrained LLMs. And then there are middleware companies who kind of provide LLM as a service. For example, Amazon Bedrock is one of the very prominent components within the entire ecosystem that provides LLM as a service. Meta also does that. They provide a LLMA 3 as a service. Uh, OpenAI does that with OpenAI APIs. And then there is a third part, which is again subdivided into two segments. One is the compute, which is primarily driven by software, and then compute, which is driven through hardware. And that is where the two companies fit in. So NetWeb basically is primarily into the hardware-driven compute, and that is also one of the space where even the government policies and government will is very significantly strong. Vivek Bhai yesterday, he's there as a speaker on the space. He's shared a link with me where I saw government has come up with a decision to spend about 10,000 odd crores building the native LLMs, native language models, right, for India and in different Indic languages. So the way I see this is from India listed perspective. To be very honest, we operate on a service level through all these frontline IT companies who will go and build service model on top of that that we discussed about code re-engineering and tool that basically is capable of creating your entire agile or Scrum artifacts on the fly. That is one of the use cases. And then the immediate use case where we are seeing a lot of interest is this the third one, which is compute, which then again is subdivided into software-driven compute and hardware-driven compute. So NetWeb sits in the hardware-driven compute. You have high-performance compute, which is primarily used in data centers, private cloud, and HCI and HPS, basically the enterprise grade, right? And naturally, they do their own cluster management because whoever is building hardware-based compute, they have to come up with a cluster management solution. Without that, it's very difficult to manage the compute that you are offering. So yeah, I see it from this perspective. One company sits on a compute as driven by software, and one is through hardware. So naturally, because of that, the margin profiles would be different. But given the India's canvas and where we are at the moment, I think there are tremendous tailwinds for both of these subcategories, software-driven compute, hardware-driven compute. Regardless where you are positioning, I think you will make a decent money.
Are there any companies in software and compute that we can study?
Yeah, there is E2E networks. Uh, I don't actively talk about it because I'm invested, and then I don't really want people to see that as a conflict of interest, so I don't talk about it. But
Sure, sure.
yeah, E2E is one of the companies which basically caught my eye last year, and it was in this similar space with Prince I mentioned about it. I was tracking the overall global consumption of GPUs and bandwidths and what's happening and where it's happening and so on. That's when basically I stumbled across this company, and it was too small to be very honest back then for make any head and tail of it. But then I started going through their softwares, which they have already made available, their AI platform, which basically helps you download any open source LLM. It allows you to choose any kind of training method. Either it can be, human feedback based or let's say pure embedding based. It allows you to do that. You can slice and dice that LLM based on the requirement that you have, and you can actually push that into your productive usage. And what happens is they're both inference and training happens on the same core. So because of that, you do not really need an additional infrastructure, separate infrastructure for inference. Because primarily when it comes to the Gen AI, inference becomes very concerning factor, right? So in some spaces like gaming, for example, or software defined vehicles, autonomous vehicles, you have the response has to be in real time. So inference has to be in real time. But there are certain spaces where a very microsecond worth of delay can be okay. So that is kind of an advantage that currently it offers. They have a platform called as TIR, which basically eases out. So you can imagine that you have to download an existing open LLM. You want to retrain it. You have to have your own embeddings. You need a vector database naturally for that, and then based on that you want to do the simulations, and then you want to push that into productive use. If you do not have a single platform managing that, it becomes little पूरा operation थोड़ा friction वाला हो जाता है, right? So you cannot really go on different APIs and different providers to do and manage that. You need a unified platform who is able to do all these things in one go. That is one thing. Second thing, then when you have your compute and inference on one core, the connectivity between the two GPU cores makes even more important. It makes of more importance, right? So primarily जो हमारे यहाँ पे data centers build हो रहे हैं, जो tier 3 data centers हैं, वो primarily they and tier 4 also in some of the cases, they primarily operate on very high speed Ethernet. But there are networking improvements that E2A has brought in. They have deployed InfiniBand instead of an Ethernet, right? So that's also one of the advantages that you get, because what happens is when you have a software driven compute, you can very easily create an abstraction on the data that you are, execute, let's say, passing through various consumption node points, right? So you can create an abstraction on that data very easily. You have lot of unstructured data that is currently part of the overall, data value chain within this generative AI. And when you have that amount of data, you with this kind of interconnectivity networking protocols, it can manage the thousand times amount of data that probably a high speed Ethernet can probably be able to manage. And then slowly you get into a level where you have multimodal outcomes like voice is one, text is one, you have images, videos, natural language processing, face recognition, and so on. So the as जैसे आपका मोड चेंज होता है, उसके accordingly you need models which are multimodal, which will not be storing the data, but they will be able to kind of create an abstraction of that data while the data is flowing, and be able to generate inferences on the fly out of that. So maybe if you are interested, you can read more about it if you haven't read, and if there is anything additionally technologically speaking, if you want to know, I'm more than happy to discuss. But in software driven compute, it's one of the small companies that operates. And hardware driven, I think we have NetWeb primarily, who is building the hardware driven infra. There is another company within the SME, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't really see any significant value within that. Then we have obviously Yota, who is sourcing a lot of GPUs. Control S is also there. Nextra is also there. So these are companies who are primarily building hardware driven compute. So yeah, that is my thought as of now on this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ameya. This was very helpful. Some good learnings for me. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Back to you, Prince. Thank you.
Just in context of time, I'm not sure. I think you also have another space coming up, right? So just wanted to check on that where we are on time.
So, Ameya, that's at 8:30. So we have buffer of 1 hour in case you guys have time. So that's not an incident.
Okay. Sure.
So quickly, Vivek, you can go ahead, then Deepak, and then Ravi.
Yeah, so thanks for giving me an opportunity. So I would like to, ask Ameya by, we were talking about E2E networks, right? But looking at the data, right? So if you check the profit and their revenues, right? So the growth is around 3x and 2x from last few years. And I know, everyone knows the opportunity size is 10x from here, right? In front of them. So how do we evaluate such companies like E2E networks, right? So can you please share about that? What would be the best criteria to evaluate such companies?
See, valuation ये ऐसी चीज है जो, to be very honest with you, I rely on certain people within my network to understand what is the right way to evaluate. Because I'm more of a technical person and I'm not really qualified enough to answer whether किसका valuation किस basis पे करना चाहिए. But the learned people with whom I have been interacting about this space as a whole, that tell me that the best metric to evaluate this is enterprise value is to EBITDA. Yeah. And that's what I try to calculate. But to be very, very honest with you, if the kind of scale is very exponentially high, um, valuation is something I sometimes tend to ignore. That could be either good or that could be bad, but this is how it is.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Amir bhai.
Thanks.
Uh,
So next is Deepak. Okay,
No,
Sandeep.
no, no.
Yeah.
I mean, let Deepak continue. Then I'll probably just take one more cut from Ameya on a topic I wanted to discuss. But yeah, please, Deepak.
Deepak, you can quickly unmute and ask your question. Okay, Nitin, over to you.
Yeah. So I have one more question related to this semiconductor opportunities in India. So this international player like Nvidia, Microchip, Qualcomm, they are showing interest in Indian market. So like what kind of avenues they see in our market? So and second question allied to this, when we will see such companies are coming from India? So that's two questions.
तो आप अगर देखोगे ना तो जो इंडिया फैब है हम लोगों का, टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट विथ यू, आई थिंक प्रिंस डिड अ similar session on semiconductor with Arun sir. He is the right person to talk about anything related to semiconductor, and especially the second question, when will India have that kind of companies? But given the kind of how would I say, improvement that we have had in the fab, uh, about the products that we use to manufacture, I think with the CG power and the plant in Anand that is coming up, we have made very significant strides, to be very honest with you. But when will we will have another company of that sort coming in? I don't really know. I'm not from semiconductor space. I've never worked in the semiconductors, so I can't really answer that. But coming to first question, see, ऐसा है कि like I said, right? So India में primarily what is happening is India का जो digital economy है, that is growing exponentially fast, right? Uh, and it is said that approximately 20% of the contribution to the GDP by 2026 would come from the digital economy, right? So और उसके underlying drivers क्या हैं आप अगर देखोगे तो you have your UPI stack, you have 5G, you have proliferation of OTT, you have DPI, which is a digital public infrastructure. You have digital factories, warehousing, building infrastructure management software, smart cities, basically. uh, high speed internet become, yeah, so basically ये सारी चीजें is basically something that is driving the demand of the data and the compute within India. So naturally, because of that, the data centers and the overall data centers space is thriving. So if the data center space is thriving, naturally the hardware providers and the compute providers like AMD, Nvidia, or whoever it is, they have a kind of a natural market in that case, right? So naturally, that is the primary reason because of which they see tremendous growth within the India as a country. So unless you have a very specific question on semiconductor, I sorry, on IT or tech, semicon के लिए, I would really suggest you to listen to that space that I think, not sure if it was Prince or someone else did that space with Arun sir. Um, but there is a space. Um, I'll try to tweet a link to that space. Let me see. But that
Yeah,
is a dedicated space.
that would be, yeah, that would be really good help. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to find out.
Thanks, Nitin. Yeah, Sandeep.
Yeah, may I just wanted to add, sorry, in between I just speaking. So in the
No
same
problem.
line what Nitin said,
Mhm.
uh I just keen to understand, though we understand with the so huge population, so many things are coming up in the data center need, or data putting on a cloud is of course is the key area. But the kind of the the technology upgradation or happening, or the technology absolution is happening, or change in the technology is happening. How do you see, the survival of all these companies? We see lot of technologies are, the hypervisors are changing, hyper HCI technologies are coming up. So how do you see in all this space respect to the revenue which they are generating? Again, we are coming on the valuation, but I'm not keen on valuation. I'm looking at the sustainability of all these companies. Like, how do you see this factor? Like,
So, see, sustainability perspective said, to be very honest, we are still very early to say that these pockets are topping out. So I don't see that happening in next 3 years at least. But on the data center and the overall value chain, and within that value chain, which are some of the companies that are operating in those pockets of the value chain, we have, I think, close to 3 hour long space that we did on data center. Again, that was with friends. So maybe you can take some time out from your schedule, and if you listen to that, and after that, maybe we can connect one on one through DM to answer your question specifically. Then probably would have a better context, and then also just to save time, that's all I'm saying, because otherwise we'll get into a lot of discussion about the data centers. But since we already have a dedicated space done on a data center, uh, I suggest that if it's possible, do this and then we can connect.
sure, sure. Thanks, Amir. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Sandeep.
So quick. So Ameya, yesterday we were briefly talking about cyber securities, opportunities, etc. More from as an investor perspective, and I understand one day can't be enough to think about it, but maybe use your network, etc. Come up with, I mean, share any insight in next space or even in personal chats, and we may need to tap some of our Bangalore network, VC network, to identify such
Hmm,
opportunities. So that
I
is one
agree.
space. And second is, if I look at IT expenditure within my function, within capital markets, etc., there are like three, four pockets where things happen, right? So anything with
Mhm.
regulatory and compliance, budgets are never a problem. You just have to do it, right? And that's all obviously very ad hoc, so there can never be a solid solutions, especially IT, etc. It's more of a typically domain consulting kind of assignments, along with some tech of it. Second part is all these analytics, which I think mostly done. I mean, every bank has these packages well deployed: Oracle Business Intelligence, QuickBooks, all these typical business analytics kind of a solution, which basically gives you canned reports, etc. So not much of spend is happening there. The spend which is majorly happening is, which I see, is the relayering of entire metadata. So all these big banks have legacy 300, 400 systems, and then massive amounts of team doing reconciliation, reporting, breaks analysis, all those processing part of it, right? So that's where a lot of expenditures are happening. They're relaying their entire data stack, making things faster, processing, analytics, everything. So that's well covered also. I mean, that's where popular themes come. One space which was very heavily talked but never took off, and that's where I probably want your any insight, because my experience is limited to banking domain, is this robotics, which is basically was process robotics, not the robotics which we typically talk about. So a
RPA.
company called Blue Prism, etc., right, where they were trying to map your keystroke, mouse movement, right? By that they could actually map what you do on a regular basis. So 90% of processing works are very standard, right? Ad hocism comes very rarely, and that they were able to do. The only thing is cost of that was so high that a lot of these companies felt like it's easy to do it with the existing manpower than some of the software. So the technology was
That's
awesome, but somehow it was never adopted purely because of cost. Do you see any of that happening in any of the spaces you track?
neither, not at the pace as you correctly said. Because I tried to sell, when I was running my own company, I tried to sell a software which was bringing an automation within. I mean, it's nothing related to the RPA, but it had an automation angle to the vendor invoice management space. I tried to sell the product within Indian markets, and the consistent feedback that I got is the sheer cost of acquisition of your product is so high that I can have 10 people working on this, and they can take care of it, and I'll still pay less money to them and have them at call anytime I want. So ये especially Indian market के perspective से अगर ये company काम कर रही है तो they will probably have hard time to penetrate this market because mindset बहुत अलग है sir, as you know, right? अगर अगर चार लोगों को बिठा के मैं काम कर सकता हूँ तो आई विल नॉट बेसिकली गेट रिड ऑफ एंड स्पेशली इन द इंजीनियरिंग मैन्युफैक्चरिंग स्पेस में तो जहाँ पे इनके ये होते हैं राइट वर्किंग काउंसिल वगैरह जैसी चीजें होती है, so it becomes even more difficult to bring the automation, be it software automation or any kind of automation. बट ऑनेस्टली ये जो जिस लेवल की ऑटोमेशन की हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं प्रोबेबली दैट्स फॉर द यूरोप, यहाँ पे ये चीज बहुत होती है. But other than that, मेरे known network में I'm not seeing that much anywhere, honestly, unless you are seeing something specific.
No,
Coming
not
to
at
the
all. Even I can't see. In fact, these solutions were sold to head offices, right? So it was not like Indian players deciding those decisions, but even those head offices have choices of Indian manpower in Pune, in Hyderabad, or even in other offshoring locations in Latin America, etc. Versus those solutions. So somehow I never saw that adoption, but when we first saw it, like 3-4 years, it was like amazing, like that something like that can happen where they're not even talking to you; they're just copying your keystroke mouse movements, and you have to just run through that process once, and they will just map it and redo it, kind of a thing. But that magic was never translated into commercial adoption. So yeah, we can leave it here. I mean, back to Prince and other speakers.
sure, sir.
Right. The equity lies. So basically, Ameya's question was on Zagal Prepaid, if I pronounced it right. So he was asking about the business view if you track that company.
No, I don't track Zaggle, honestly, unless someone else on the speakers list tracks. I don't track Zaggle.
We'll check with Saurabh once he joined. And meanwhile, Mohit, over to you.
No specific question. Just wanted to hi Ameya as well.
Hello, Mohit
Just
bhai, how are you?
bus you're all well. Just wanted to reflect on semis. What you got to understand is, I mean, the kind of semis India is building is nowhere close to, let's say, for example, what a Samsung a top end or a what a TSMC is, and it is only one part of the value chain. So, of course, if you see, there are fabless companies, there are design companies, and then there are, of course, the companies that do contract manufacturing. So TSMC is just a contract manufacturer. So what CG is doing is contract manufacturing, and until and unless you are able to innovate very, very, very quickly and keep up the pace, it is very difficult to gain any sort of market share in this, right? I think. Uh, um, uh, in any of these companies there will be a massive capex drag unless they can really prove the uphill battle they are against. So I would take it with a pinch of salt. I would strongly recommend to follow the numbers rather than the news, because I mean news may look nice and it is like India first, and I mean we'll be like the top the leaders in semis and all that. But I think I mean there's a massive uphill battle here. That'll be my only comment on semis.
Thank you, Mohit bhai. I think you were also part of that session with Arun sir, right? Very proactively.
I am personally invested into semis. I mean, for a long
Okay.
time now, for a very
Okay.
long time. I mean, I'm talking of 7+ years. Of course, I mean, semis go way, way beyond that. But what I mean is, I've seen a massive washing machine sort of a behavior in these companies, wherein I mean, as you bring in a new product line or manufacturing line, wherein you're able to build, let's say, 5 nm chips or 3 nm chips and whatnot. Um, because of which you are able to get the next line in order, for which you require massive capex. And by the time you are able to recoup your capex, you are ready for bringing in another innovative thing that is happening. So essentially, the cash flow becomes very challenging. I mean, and that is very evident. You can see with Intel. I mean, they are just living on subsidies from the US government, because US government doesn't have a choice, so to say. And what they don't want to do is just have TSMC in their I mean, all their eggs with TSMC. So they are having Intel run. Having said that, I mean, a company with, I mean, 650 to 60 years of I mean, hardcore experience, and it being known as the father of semis, is struggling. So I mean, it is difficult to see how others can thrive. The only people who are really able to do it is TSMC. And there is a interesting, very interesting podcast on Acquired on TSMC. So if somebody really wants to understand in depth about TSMC, they should have a listen to it. It's about a 3+ hours of it, so worth listening to it.
Great.
So Mohit, one quick question from Saurabh. So since you track the basically global companies, so how USA Tech is doing? If any thoughts around that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, too broad a question. How is US tech doing? I mean, it is doing fine. Long and short of it is that, I mean, it is a massive, massive industry, right? I mean, they just set the tone for everything. I mean, more than 60 to 70% of the gains in S&P 500, and of course Nasdaq is pretty much tech, in the last year have been driven by like top six companies. Um, and they pretty much, I mean, bring almost everything in terms of innovation to the market. One thing which I have specifically noted, and that may be a cause of worry for the short term, is all of these companies, after let's say 2 years, are plowing in massive amount of capex in upgrading their infrastructure around the chips from Nvidia, the servers from Nvidia, and also other related needs. And that capex would mean that the free cash flow that they would distribute to the shareholders is going to be a bit constrained, right? Having said that, of course, both Apple and Google have announced their own buybacks. Meta announced its first dividends, and also, of course, it does buybacks. I mean, Microsoft, we all know what it's doing, both on AI and other things. So I would say that is something. I would say, in the short term, like a year or so, there I would not expect them to run the way they have in 2024, and maybe also in a bit in 2025. And that's primarily because of the amount of capex. And by the way, Amazon is in the same boat as well.
Thanks, Mohit.
मोहित भाई,
Yeah, Ramanjit, over to you. Yeah.
नहीं नहीं, एक पॉइंट था मोहित भाई. Microsoft has invested $10 billion on to power just AI on solar panels.
Thanks, Amit. Yeah, Ramanjit. Ramanjit, you are still on mute. You there?
You can take a
Hello.
couple of questions and wrap up, Prince, because I
Yeah,
know
Ameya.
you have another
Right.
space, and I'm pretty sure you would appreciate some break before that space as well. It's going on
Okay.
for quite
So,
some
Raman,
time.
you able to speak? Yes, yes, Ameya. Ramanjit? If there is any issue, you can drop and join again. So quickly, Amit, your question, and then Mane, and then a couple of questions from Ramanji.
Sure, Prince. I have one specific question. ठीक है अभी अपने इंडिया में स्मॉल एंड मीडियम साइज बिजनेस ठीक है ऑटोमेशन यदि हम कंपेयर करेंगे विथ बिग कंपनीज ठीक है मैं एसएमई से और बिग कंपनीज फॉर एग्जांपल लाइक टाटा ले लेंगे तो उनमें एक कार मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में दे हैव एडवांस रोबोटिक्स रोबोट्स यूज कर रहे हैं मेरे ख्याल से अभी फिलहाल तो हाउ बट इफ यू टेक small businesses which makes car parts within India, is it become more affordable and are they using any specific expensive robotics technology? That's my question. Thank you.
I can't really, to be very honest, I'm not qualified enough to answer. Maybe since Mohit tracks semiconductors and power and manufacturing space, maybe he can come and comment. But that's, to be honest with you, that's a little out of my value chain to comment anything.
Ameya, I think Mohit also got dropped. Anyways, so Ameya, one question is around Schneider. So the recent results and some price action you might have observed. So any thoughts broadly on the business point of view? Are the things intact, or maybe we can say at earlier point in time the valuation was on the upper side, so that is more or less balancing at this point in time.
I think so. That is one of the cases, but also at the same point in time, what happened is initially जब rally करना शुरू किया था stock, people were not really focused on India listed में क्या flow in हो रहा है और क्या India unlisted में flow in हो रहा है क्या Schneider really that is where participants are asking the question, what is exactly flowing into your bucket that is going to help the investors? And the price action that is happening is an outcome of that. That's my sincere observation. Regardless of all these advanced solutions that Schneider parent is able to bring to the Indian markets, there is some part of all these entire demand and TAM which is existing that थोड़ा सा उसका benefit तो definitely pass on होगा ही है regardless क्या solutions parents से आते हैं क्या solutions unlisted से आते हैं. So yeah, I just think that it's normalizing, and let's see. I mean, how when it actually picks it up. But when it comes to purely from to pure technology point of view, I think recently they had a technology day. I think last month on 4th, and some of the products that they have exhibited are really amazing, especially in the high density you know solutions, a high density power solution, as well as compact rack system, modular systems for the data centers, grid solutions, grid monitoring and automation solutions. So, very, very promising solutions that they have exhibited. But again, like I said, it happens with every MNC in India. The parent is involved, the unlisted is involved, the listed is involved. कौन सा revenue किसके पास कब जा रहा है थोड़ा सा clarity नहीं आता है. But I think to give you a little bit of better answer, I think on call में काफी information है उसका. And secondly, Dhruv tracks Schneider way better than I do, Dhruv Ravani. So maybe either you can do a space with him or you can ask him to exclusively put his view about this. That would be better.
Great, thanks. So Manaya, you can quickly unmute and ask your question, and after that, no more speaker. I'll simply take few questions from the comments and we close for today.
Sir, I wanted to ask exactly what are the platforms that you use to gather information? Because in this talk only you talked about people plus AI as well as the register. So I wanted just the other platforms that you use to gather information regarding what are the developments in the IT sector.
देखो ऐसा है कि I source my content from various sectors and I have been curating my kind of go-to list for over a decade already now. So I use various like right from the academic articles that McKinsey and Boston Consulting publish. I also read some of the academic articles that universities also publish. MIT has its own publication network. INSEAD also has its own publication network. I track all of these. Then there are certain websites, as and when I come across, I just keep on adding to my list. I am subscribed to Ken. So anything related to technology, whenever they publish an article, usually they have references, and I go through those references to find out if I can read a little bit more. There are certain people on Twitter who track technology sector on a much broader level than I do. So I follow them, and I also look up to them what exactly kind of contents that they are consuming. And yeah, that's how I curate my list. And I mean, there is no go-to thing. The NASCOM also has a very good repository of content, and उनका content बहुत frequently update होता है. They release lot of industry specific, and within the whole industry, like we have multiple value chains, right? Security एक हो गया, आपका DevOps हो गया, AI हो गया, कुछ भी हो गया. So all ये छोटे छोटे pockets में भी they keep on publishing industry trends क्या है, कहाँ पे क्या change हो रहा है, किसकी demand ज्यादा है, who is doing what. All you have to do is just register on NASCOM, and if you are a registered user, you have free access to all of their publications like that. So that is also one of the lists. I also listen to these good podcasts that Mohit bhai also mentioned, acquired, and there are some cloud specific speakers that I follow on Spotify. I'll try to, curate kind of a list and post about all these places that I track. But to be very honest with you, curating your reading list is something that you should keep on doing, and it's an ongoing activity. And I've been doing that for almost last 10 years or all. So I don't have one specific space, but these are some of the things that come to my mind.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Great.
So,
So may I quickly read questions in the comments? Those were asked long back, तो थोड़ा justice करते हैं, but we can take quick answer to that. So first question is by Rohit is asking many companies across cautious about spendings and reviewing all the deals again, doing all cost cutting and so any thoughts? And in case we have already discussed, you can simply say so that the person can
देखो
listen later.
cost takeout deals, so it's very obvious that when you have how would I say spend cuts in certain pockets, usually जो engineering and manufacturing या BFSI में भी for example, ये usually बहुत common part है process का. जब भी कभी आपका spends थोड़ा सा impact होता है customer के साथ तरफ से, but they still want to keep the spend active, keep the vendors engaged. They want to see कि कौन से pockets हैं जहाँ पे हम लोग improvements लेके आ सकते हैं, and then that would reduce our costs. That's also one of the ways to improve or say stay afloat when the overall market is not very friendly. So cost takeout deals basically signify you that the customer that you're engaged with is not finding market very conducive to do business. And जब ऐसा होता है तो usually cost takeout deals are very common across the industry. Right, so it's a process. एक phase होता है जब cost takeout deals होती है, एक phase होता है जब suddenly expenses के एकदम दरवाजे खुल जाते हैं. But like Saurabh also said, certain spends like what happened in 2020 with cloud, that happen once in a decade, right? But rest of the time it can be optimization, cost takeout, modernization, all these kind of various kind of deals that keep on happening across
Ameya,
the
Ameya,
overall.
wealth is speaker is on. Well, Ameya.
Sorry.
Yeah, Maya, we can continue.
Yeah. No, that was my answer, Prince.
Yeah. So Raman, if the speaker is fine, you can ask
Yeah, are
now.
you able to hear me, Prince?
Yeah.
Okay. Amya, I just wanted to ask about a specific company, Olitech. Uh,
Sorry, what tech?
Olitech.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you spoke about how you found its results, but more than that, I was really thinking how should we see if this company like Olitech, since its inception, not when it came with an IPO, but since its inception, how would you rate its growth? Has it grown enough? And what is your framework to see if it has grown enough? Do you see the workforce numbers? Do you see in which technology stack they're operating?
Not
You know,
really. So probably from an analyst perspective, workforce कैसा expand हुआ है, and then ये सारी चीजें probably could make sense. But I look at these things a little differently. I see on the overall value chain and the offerings का जो उनका value chain है वहाँ पे वो कैसे थे पहले and what they are doing now. So if they are able to, so typically कोई भी company जब इतना छोटा होता है when they start out, they naturally start out with one of the vendors, enterprise grade vendors, and they start offering implementation services. उस टाइम पे जो भी काम आता है वो करते हैं. They keep on doing that, and over a period of time, what improves is their understanding of that enterprise software as well as their understanding of underlying domain in which they are working. So it helps them gain more customers. So ये चीज के through, if they are able to scout and convert more customers in a specific domain, that is also, why can't that be seen as a growth? That is also a growth, right? When they get into very specific enterprise software, slowly they keep on implementing with all the different versions that they come out. If they're able to scale up and become a co-development partner for some of the specific product variants, that should be also seen as a growth. If the company is able to survive and over a period of time, if they are not only doing the services, but they also are able to launch the IP on top, that is also should be seen as a growth, right? So these are some of the metrics that I personally see. These metrics probably will not make sense to an analyst because the way they see and evaluate a company is very different. But I see from where they started and where they have come.
right.
But like I said, the growth is kind of now, lot of growth will be dependent on the kind of acquisition that they do. Because either they will have to expand very aggressively in some of the high margin markets, or they will have to bring in additional product offerings. So they are currently focused on Microsoft, and वो मस्टेक जैसा scenario हो रहा है यहाँ पे, right? So I'm not saying that Microsoft is slowing down anywhere. So it's a much better product than Oracle, to be very honest, and adoption perspective set. But yeah, I mean, there are certain ifs and buts within the business, how soon the acquisition happens and what kind of acquisition happens. Earlier, management wanted to do acquisition in the US space for the Dynamics, and if it would have been an India acquisition, then the last con call they mentioned that they want to do an acquisition for Dynamics within the India. So if they do the acquisition for Dynamics within the India, their margin profile and their blended billing rate is probably not going to change, right? So there are certain things that are currently. I mean, I also have question for. Unfortunately, couldn't join the con call. Otherwise, I would have asked that question. But their management is very friendly. They are very approachable. If I send an email, they come back with an answer. So probably I'll try doing that. But yeah, as a company, they have grown. There is no doubt about that.
Hmm. So on from here on, I mean, just staying to growth, uh, would you see them growing in their obvious business, which is of implementation, and or you think they would deepen their offering, maybe more into IP products with high margin, or you
I
think
don't
it's the
I don't
next
see
phase?
them I don't see them becoming a specifically productized company. They are still lot of focused on Microsoft and the kind of services that Microsoft is bringing in. And they are very small also as a company. Uh, we cannot really look at this company the way we look at a frontline IT company, for example. It takes long time to have an IP. It takes long time to have a productized service approach. It 2-3 decades चले जाते हैं before companies are able to do that. And जब 2 decade पहले का जो IT का scenario है और अभी का IT का scenario, it's very different. The market is very saturated, very competitive right now. So these companies are trying to create their own small niche between the overall canvas that is available. And I think they will continue to do whatever the numbers that they promised, 25% growth that they promised. But again, what happens is because it's an SME, Not many people are really keen to bet on an SME company for a 25% growth. SME का तो आपको पता है आजकल अगर आपको क्वार्टर ऑन क्वार्टर 40% ग्रोथ नहीं मिला तो people are unhappy, right? तो लोगों के expectations change हुए, perceptions change हुए, but I think this is a very steady business, very steady compounder, very good promoter with a very clean intent. Uh, so I don't find any concerns holding it from that perspective.
Okay, thanks,
But,
Ameya.
see,
Thanks.
yeah, I think
And Ameya, there are
Prince, maybe we can.
last question.
Okay.
Last question. So there are a couple of questions on Sonata software and its result. So if any thoughts or maybe you've gone through the result.
Yeah. Sonata के result के बारे में, in fact, I posted also when the results came. To be very honest, I results are not that bad as as people are seeing it. And Sonata is also scaling up on the value chain within the ecosystem that it used to operate. पहले तो ये payment driven company था. And I've talked about Sonata quite a few number of times on your spaces, right? So I'm not very surprised by the result. It's just that, like I said, थोड़ा सा भी 19-20 दिख जाता है तो market usually crashes. And what happened is basically for first time in last I think 3 years, Sonata reported a quarter-on-quarter drop on the revenues from the international services. But I think that also had a very genuine reason for that. So given all these things, and that happened, I think, because of the one-time write-off that they took for $20 million, I think. Because of that, they saw PAT as well as the sequential growth lower for first time in the 3 years. And I think also I think that they restructured one of the $5 million client. It's not that they lost it. But I think it was just overreaction, and typically how it happens is when you have a large deal and you're still in engagement with a customer, you're ramping up the deal, right? So during the ramp up phase, देखो ऐसा होता है ना, right from the RFP, when you are engaged with the customer, even before your deployment or a build phase start, some of the resources that are working on that RFP solutioning and designing and all that, they are blocked on that deal. Even though you can bill them to some other customer, you cannot bill them because you don't want to jeopardize the execution of that deal. You don't want to lose that deal. And typically हर large deal में initial ऐसा phase होता है जहाँ पे आपके resources जो होते हैं वो block होते हैं. You cannot bill them because the deal is still ramping up. And एक बार उसका ramp up शुरू हो गया, उसके बाद से revenue trickle down होना शुरू हो जाता है. So I think some of the billing also they lost because of the very same reason, right? And I think they are diversifying very well from payments earlier now to shipping, transportation, and telecom. So ये space अगले 2 से 4 quarter में I think काफी अच्छा करेगा. Shipping में I think they won a very big customer in US, 3PL customer in US. So जो एक कंपनी BFSI payments पे heavy हुआ करती थी, वो अगर US में जाके कोई इतना बड़ा 3PL का customer score कर पा रहा है, तो definitely that is something to appreciate. And one thing is always sure, most of the IT companies, including Sonata, Q4 is always poor in front of Q3, no matter what they do. If you listen to some of the con calls, management also literally speaks in these words. Q4 all will always look poor in front of Q3. And on top of that, अगर ये ऐसे billing थोड़ा सा block होता है या फिर एक कोई write off लेना पड़ता है for some acquisition or something of that sort, naturally आपका Q3 optically और खराब दिख के आ जाएगा. तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है it was a knee jerk reaction, but it's a healthy growing business and not much concerns, to be very honest.
Thanks, Ameya. Really helpful, and we took almost close to 3 hours. Thank you so much for speaking for such a long, and it
Fantastic,
always
fantastic. Thanks,
pleasure listening
Prince.
to your thoughts.
Maybe we'll do another space
And
after
for our
next quarter results.
100%,
Yeah.
100%, sir.
Thank you so
And then
much,
for our
everyone,
audience,
for really joining. I really appreciate you spent 3 hours on Sunday. So wish you a very profitable Monday tomorrow.
yeah, likewise. Thanks, Ameya. And then for our audience, those who joined late can surely listen to the conversation. It would be on Twitter as well, and sometime down the line, I'll upload on the YouTube channel also. So let me ask you if you are joining for the first time. So definitely, I pinned a tweet to the spaces wherein I've shared the link to YouTube, Telegram, and Twitter. Of course, if you're attending, you know what my handle is. So definitely, you guys can connect with my handles over Twitter, YouTube, and Telegram, so as to keep updated on any sessions or any good information related to the equity markets. And thanks for taking out time. And in the want of time, if I was not able to do justice to your questions, so definitely when you join next, I'll try to get you guys first. And obviously, there are so many speakers when Ameya and Saurabh join, so it happens you are not able to do justice to everybody. So with that, I would take everybody's leave, and surely the call for connecting with me and YouTube, etc., is so that I can also feel equally motivated so as to bring more speakers and more such valuable sessions. And as Ameya was telling about semiconductors, so it was the space is not done with me, so definitely I'll try to reach out to Arun through Ameya or anyone in common to us, and definitely semiconductor is one space wherein we can love to have a spaces so as to understand the space much better. And one more thing, like I want, if there is anyone who is into the nuclear space, in the sense the companies who are catering to nuclear energy or setting up of nuclear energy, so definitely that is one space I would also like to bring to everybody. So with that note, I also have a spaces, very interesting spaces at 8:30 today only. So definitely you guys can take some break and rejoin us at 8:30. So definitely that would be worth just like the spaces today. Thank you so much. Good night. Take care.